Woke pirates, yes, they're robbing, sold out to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took out from the bottomless pit, my head was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs.
Hey, what's up, troops? Jeff Evely, the magnanimous Gen Xer male, and I practice radical candor. Welcome to the show today, everybody. This 30th day of January 2024. Times are flying by. There's all kinds of stuff going on out there. As always, got a great show lined up for you now. And I had a little bit of an issue with the old Rumble feed there this morning, but it looks like it's up and going now. So give me a chat over there and make sure you guys are with me just to make sure. I'll go ahead and say good morning while we're at that. And Leonard says, good afternoon. Oh, it is afternoon, isn't it? I'm used to doing the morning show. I just moved to this spot here this week. I'm giving it a try. I've been talking about doing this for a little while, and it mostly have to do with like just sort of deconflicting the freedom schedule out there. Like Jason Levine's doing a morning show, and of course everybody's doing an evening show. So I think we should try to find, stay out of each other's way and try to find a way to collaborate instead of compete. And Evelyn is here saying, hello to you, Evelyn. Thanks for always being with us. And Holly says, good morning. Well, it's afternoon where I am. So good afternoon to you. And Cora says, hello, everyone. Is this the new time after Levine, Jeff? I'm kind of thinking that. Yeah. Let me know what you guys think, though. I'm totally open to the feedback. And the regulars, you guys really do mean a lot to me. So please, I'll keep the regulars over a wider audience, I think, because it really is more like a movement than a podcast following or something like that around here. So I appreciate your feedback. And Chris has given us the triple slashy right back at you, brother. Andrew says, good morning, Sergeant Major Jeff Evely. Good morning, Patriots. Good morning, Dags. Good morning, all. Good afternoon to you, sir. And Marion is with us as always, says, good afternoon, Jeff and friends. Beautiful voice, lots of emotion. Thank you very much. That's with respect to the intro song. And I guess you guys over on Rumble didn't catch the whole thing there. My apologies for that, but I managed to get it all kind of sorted out as it was rolling. And Jamie says, greetings from Ontario. Ontario it is. We're going to talk about that a little bit here today. And Vote Harder Sheeple says, haha, no push-ups for me. I'm on time. All right. Great job, everybody, getting here on time. RJ Sawyers let me know, yep, it's working over on Rumble. And he says, hi, Jeff. Hey, how you doing, brother? Thanks for being with us. And Terry Doucette, one of my most favorite boomers, is saying, Terry D here from Vernon, BC. Well, good morning to you out there on the left coast of Canada. All right. Oh, hey, David is here this morning. What's going on, brother? David and I had a great conversation there the other night. So good afternoon to you, David. Appreciate you being with us. Okay, let's go ahead and dive into this sucker here, folks. Here is Friedrich Nietzsche, and he says, I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset from now on, I can't believe you. Well, I think we can all relate to that, right? I mean, there is this kind of profound betrayal that's taken place here in Canada. That is that the Canadian populace has been utterly betrayed by our institutional leadership. And it is that betrayal that I find so upsetting. And I think everybody can relate to that as well. I think that's kind of how it is for everybody. And it's the fact that we just can't believe anything they're telling us sort of from here on out that is particularly disturbing. So there is Nietzsche for you. And speaking of Ontario, here is Worst Case Ontario. And it says, everything is sexist, racist, and homophobic. And there's Justin Trudeau giving us the Sieg Heil, the Roman salute. And the fine print here says, Justin Trudeau and all his friends are moving forward over the edge, toppling statues, burning books, civil servants, Nazi crooks. Crocodile smiles, living in denial. Paying hush money is now in style. Blackface groomers are too obscene. When the drama queen gets his makeup clean. How will his, I can't even read this. How will his jet fix all those clowns? The celebrity circus has just left town. Queen of the tab kids. Queen of the, I think it says tab kids. Queen of the tabloids. Trick of the tail. Moved to Mumbai to spend 100 years in jail. Getting woke, going broke. Plenty of weasels for the farmers to stoke. Line them up, feed first. This is no joke. This is thirsty work. Vaping true dope. I think it's, I'm not sure what that says. Sorry, guys, but the fine print is pretty fine indeed. You get the idea. Not a bad poem from what I can gather. And there is the dear leader, Worst Case Ontario. Okay, speaking of the dear leaders, Worst Case Ontario, he looks pretty upset in this picture, wouldn't you say? He looks pretty cranky there. And the title here, Toronto Sun, coming courtesy of, I believe, Warren Kinsella. Where does it say? Judge ruling may have saved Canada. Trudeau was wrong invoking the Emergencies Act. Okay. And here he is. Oh.
With this, we do not agree with this decision, and respectfully, we will be appealing it.
Last week, Federal Court of Canada Justice Richard Mosley may have saved the country. Mosley is the judge who ruled that the Liberals' invocation of the Emergencies Act against the Freedom Convoy in February of 2022 was unconstitutional, and it was. The government can't just decide on its own that it needs to use the biggest hammer in the federal arsenal on ordinary citizens. And that's basically what Mosley's decision has made more difficult next time. And that's what saved us. Now, Mosley said there was a lot going on in the convoy that was illegal. You can't trespass. You can't impede the traffic. You can't keep people from operating their businesses or going to their employment. And all of that was being made much more difficult by the convoy. You can't have excess noise. And they sat there for 3 weeks honking their horns. But Mosley said all of those can be dealt with by the local and provincial authorities. And the Emergencies Act specifically says Ottawa may not invoke the act unless the emergency is national. Mosley said this wasn't. It was only in 3 locations. It was at the Ambassador Bridge between Windsor and Detroit. It was at the Coots border crossing in Alberta. And it was mostly in downtown Ottawa. So it wasn't a national emergency. And even if it is a national emergency, the Emergencies Act is only justified when there is no other law that can be used to deal with the threat. When the provinces are incapable of dealing with it. So the federal government has to deal with it, and it doesn't have any other law in order to stop the threat to national security. Well, the protest in Ottawa never rose to that level. In Coots, in southern Alberta, there were 4 people arrested who had weapons and modified and explosive devices who said they might kill police officers, and that's awful. That's not a national emergency. It's not a threat to the national security.
Well, we're not too sure about that one. It looks like those weapons, well, first of all, the cache that they showed by the RCMP, it was pretty obviously fake. It wasn't evidence, wasn't handled in evidence bags, and it wasn't handled properly anyway. And I believe the pipe bombs to which he's referring were nowhere near Coots at the time. But hey, we'll wait and see what washes out. Warren Kinsella, so caveat on that one, I guess, guys.
Security. And so Mosley was right. The federal government used an elephant gun to kill a mosquito. A really bad, nasty batch of wasps and hornets, but they overused the Emergencies Act.
A little bit of offense set there, Kinsella.
And he's absolutely right about that. But how did that save the country? Because what it does is it tells future governments, and I hope it tells this government too, but this government doesn't listen to anything. I hope it tells future governments, though, that they are not above the law. When they get into an inconvenient position, which is politically damaging to them, they can't suspend civil rights across the country. They can't invoke the Emergencies Act. They can't freeze people's bank accounts just because that's easier for them. On the morning of the invocation of the Emergencies Act in February 14th, 2022, the RCMP said, look, we haven't tried all the police actions yet that might end this blockade. That in itself should have told the government they didn't have the constitutional authority to go ahead with the Emergencies Act.
Another good point here. Bonnie is pointing out that the Ambassador Bridge was cleared by the time of the invocation. Coots too, I believe. Traffic was impeded, but by the authorities, and they weren't honking for 3 weeks. No, they weren't honking for 3 weeks. There was a injunction that was put in place that said that they couldn't honk after, I think it was 6 p.m., and they didn't. They abided by the injunction. They played ball every step of the way.
The premiers in a conference call before the Emergencies Act was invoked said, no, Mr. Prime Minister, I don't think you need the Emergencies Act. We should be dealing with this at the local or provincial level. That's what made this unconstitutional. But that's also what is undermining people's faith in institutions, is that the federal government, this particular federal government, when it doesn't get its way, likes to use very arbitrary means against the people who oppose it. And that's what Justice Richard Mosley saved us from. For Post Media, I'm Lauren Gunter.
Lauren Gunter, sorry. Yeah, that's Lauren Gunter. All right. Yeah, I mean, What do you expect? He's a boomer and mainstream conservative. So, but this is mainstream. It's coming through the mainstream. It's out there. So I think that's a win in the aggregate, even if he's perhaps still asleep to a few of the issues around this. And it's not, the arbitrarity is one component of it, but I think the worst component of it is the use of violence. I mean, they used violence for their political convenience to crush perfectly peaceful demonstrations. So that's the real disturbing part. And the arbitrarity and the caprice are central to the essence of totalitarianism, as Christopher Hitchens once said. So, and here is a little update on what's going on with that ruling that we just got, the judicial review. Eddie Cornell, who's a founding member of V4F, was one of the applicants to that judicial review. So here is a message from Eddie. He says, "To our fellow Canadians, after a historic victory in federal court, our legal team at Loberg, Ector, Vincent Girses, Eddie Cornell, and Jeremiah Jost are taking the next step in legal action by suing those in government, the financial institutions who froze people's bank accounts, and the police officers who beat up and injured innocent Canadians. Our team took on this challenge for all Canadians, and we are doing it again. This time, we are asking all Canadians who have been affected as a result of the Emergencies Act invocation to join us in this historic lawsuit. The more Canadians we have join us in this fight, the greater our chances of success. This initiative is a massive undertaking and will take a tremendous amount of resources and financial support. That is why we are launching, quote, the Accountability Project, close quote, a completely independent and transparent fundraising initiative. Our website at tapcan.org will be up shortly with more information, ways to donate, and get involved. To join the fight for accountability, reach out to us at injured.by.emergencies.act@gmail.com. Help us hold them all accountable, respectively, Eddie Cornell, Vincent Girses, and Jeremiah Jost. All right, so there you go, folks. If you were beat up by the police or had your bank accounts frozen, your property smashed, all of the thuggish kind of tactics that they engaged in, then by all means, reach out to these folks at injured.by.emergencies.act@gmail.com. And here is the behind the scenes. This is what I'm always talking about. It's the people behind the scenes that we're really after here. Trudeau is just the Wizard of Oz, right? So a little peek behind the curtain here with Jody Thomas doing an interview with who is she talking to there? That looks like, it's Vashi Kapolis. And Wiretap Media is putting this out there saying former NSIA, that's the National Security and Intelligence Advisor, not that Jody Thomas has a background in security or intelligence. She's a Coast Guard officer. So the fisheries, former NSIA to the PM Jody Thomas was on CTV last night running a disinformation campaign for the government. Thomas claimed the Freedom Convoy was becoming increasingly violent. Guns were being reported in the trucks, and there were threats to the security of Canada. Yeah, okay, whatever, boomer female. Here we go.
I think, as I said in my poke testimony, what we were seeing in terms of activity on the ground and intelligence was very clear. There was a huge occupation here in Ottawa. It was increasingly violent. We were starting to hear language about weapons being in the trucks. We had the arrest in Coutts, which was a significant weapons cache and very concerning. The charges that have been laid there are indicative.
So that's part of the narrative that they're spinning. As you can see, this is something that she's standing on.
Of what was going on and what was being planned. And we had to take action to end it. There was an economic threat to Canada. There was a security threat to Canada. There's a reputational threat to Canada. But
I'm not so sure about the security threat. She hasn't supported that. But as you can see, they're talking about their image. This is what really matters.
Didn't know was as concerning as what we did know, and we knew a lot. And
what do you mean by that?
We knew a lot about what the plans were, that these people were going to stay. There was the whole...
unless you came out and talked to them.
Group of people who thought they were going to overthrow the government. Obviously, that wasn't going to happen, but they were here to stay, and they were using intimidation and violence and threat to ensure that the occupation persisted, and we were seeing increasingly what we would call radicalized language from people about, we're going to kill, we'll do whatever we need to do.
Yeah, okay. And where is the evidence supporting that? Well, it's not in any of the documents filed with the federal court, obviously. So they're sticking to their narrative. No surprise there. But we are gaining ground, folks. And here is Andy Lee. And she's given us a little reminder. It was the anniversary of the Freedom Convoy there over the weekend. And she says 2 years ago today, reinforcements arrive at the second main convoy, lands in Ottawa, bringing another small group of fringe citizens holding unacceptable views into the city to protest against government of Canada. And Terry over on Rumble saying outright lies again. Yeah, that is the case. And let me see. Regina is saying all these people who made these public claims need to come back before the cameras and admit they were just plain wrong with their information. Jody Thomas. Yeah, I've been pointing to Jody Thomas as basically kind of at the center of the whole EMA invocation. Her and Janice Charette, basically, but yeah, I'm really looking at Jody Thomas as the national security and intelligence advisor to the prime minister, who seems to have been pushing this. And when she was pressed on this at the inquiry there with, the EMA inquiry, when she was pressed on this, like we could see that her own intelligence assessments said that all this online activity that she's so concerned with could be described as shit posts and don't really amount to anything. And she just kind of put that nose up in the air like, oh, the era of social media, you can't ignore that stuff. And it's like, but you're not a qualified analyst. You have no qualifications in a security background. But in her mind, she's like, oh, that's just an analyst's assessment. They're not a real big shot like me. And that is the culture throughout government of Canada. And that's what I saw in the military and my time in Ottawa. And here is Andy Lee, and she is responding to Gordon Johnson, who posted on that previous post that she made, said, when did the terrorism day start? Or what day did the terrorism start? And she says, in Ottawa, that was the following day. We had a dance drum circle. The beat was obviously secret code instructing extremists, white supremacists, to carry out an insurrection. Everybody knows that. So here's some more footage from the trucker convoy. Look at those terrorists. Isn't it terrible? And yeah, Bonnie was just saying, when you blatantly lie, you don't admit it was a mistake. And Andrew was saying, it's not just about their being wrong. It is about their outright bald-faced lies. Yeah, I agree with both of you on that one. I mean, they knew what they were doing, and they just tried to spin a story. They said themselves, like, we reimagined the law. We reimagined the Emergencies Act. And all these legal mechanisms need to be put in place for us to be able to crush our own citizens with violence anytime they disagree with us. So, and here's bushels per acre, and they're saying tomorrow on CBC, the RCMP will hold a funeral procession for their police pylon that was tragically ran over in Coutts. The pylon was a part of the service for 27 years. It was 3 days away from retirement before it was slowly rolled over. The driver will serve 10 months. So that's what's going on with the trial. Out there in, I believe that was at Coutts with the pylon. And here's a good James Sowery. Sorry is the guy's name. James Sowery was just sentenced to 10 years for brushing up against a pylon with his vehicle. And Patriot Smoothie's making a pretty good compare and contrast here, where he says David Zegarak plowed his car into 4 freedom protesters in Winnipeg during the Freedom Convoy. He pled guilty in summer 2023. The Crown wanted 18 months of jail. No clue if he even got that. James Sowery incidentally hit a pylon and was sentenced to 10 months in prison today. Crooked. Yeah, crooked isn't even the word. Selective application of the law, right? I mean, they just abuse every power in their authority to, to abuse their citizens, any citizen who disagrees with them. And whether that comes to, lenient sentences for people who carry out terrorism against those in power's political opponents. I think that applies there as well. But here is the footage from that scene in Winnipeg. This was during the Freedom Convoy. There he is, coming through in his Jeep Liberty, which is not a real Jeep, and he just plows over 3 people. And we got a guy. They were going for 18 months. The prosecution was going for 18 months. And we got James Sowery getting 10 months for hitting a pylon. So good compare and contrast there, Smoothie. Here's Mocha Bezirgan. Quote, we have 5 political prisoners now, says a supporter of James Sowery after he was sentenced to 10 months in prison for hitting a pylon with his truck that made an RCMP officer fear for his life. Supporters of Sowery believe that his prosecution is political for having brought firewood to the truckers protesting COVID mandates 2 years ago in Coutts, Alberta. He was found guilty by a jury of assault with a weapon and dangerous driving. Sowery's actions were deemed criminal and threatening, even though it was acknowledged that he did not hit nor attempt to hit the RCMP officer as he was passing by a checkpoint. Sowery maintains that he accidentally hit the pylon and had inadequate legal representation. He intends to appeal the decision and asks the public to financially support his appeal. More to come from Media Bezirgan. So I guess when we get some word on how you can support James's legal defense, we'll let you know. And if anybody knows, maybe in the comments, let me know and I'll throw it up there.
He had an opportunity to maybe go a little softer, give James time to be with his family and appeal a wrong decision. But he didn't. And now he's in jail and we've got.
Oh, did I say 10 years? I meant 10 months. I definitely meant 10 months. Sorry about that, guys.
Got 5 political prisoners in Alberta now, right?
What's the message that's being sent from the courts?
It doesn't matter how ridiculous the circumstances are. If you speak out against the government and the narratives that it's pushing, they're going to hammer you. And, I just met James and talking with him. It's funny, right? We're all coming to the same conclusions, right?
And what do you make of the absence of media presence?
Well, I think that speaks for itself and the quality of our media. Like, thank goodness you're here because you're the only one here, right? And, trying to get James' story out on other platforms, but you're the only one here in the trenches. And I think that speaks volume about the media and about what you're doing, right? So continue, keep up the good work.
Give Mocha a follow. He is killing it out there. Production value, and he's all over all of the right topics as well. So that's at Bezirgan Mocha on X. All right. And moving into some of what the other side is up to here. Here is a Never Again Live podcast at gmail.com. And they say, pro-Hamas supporters swarm and threaten Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at a mosque in Quebec today. So here's the footage from
Shame, shame, Trudeau! Shame, shame, Trudeau! Shame, shame, Trudeau! Shame on you! 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 Get out of here! Shame on you! 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 Cowards! You guys are cowards, son! You guys are cowards! All of you! Shame, shame!
So there you go. Pro-Hamas demonstrators wearing their COVID masks, chasing after Justin Trudeau as he bravely runs away. This is good, though. I mean, it goes to show you that the left is balkanizing. As I've been pointing out, like these are leftist causes. These are all progressive causes, and progressivism is decidedly an anti-Western movement. So anybody who wants to destroy the West, they just they band together, and it's evil people always support each other. That is their chief strength, just like Solzhenitsyn said. So here's Canada Proud. Your tax dollars funding her hate. Welcome to Trudeau's Canada, and they are retweeting Gada Sasa, and it says, this is one of the people leading pro-Hamas rallies in Canada. She has also received a federal research grant, and she's saying, anytime I see pro-Palestine comrades raise the Canadian flag or stand for the Canadian anthem, I cringe. Canada is a settler colony, just like Israel before being its ally. Down with Canada, down with Israel. Yeah, you see how it's all part of the same narrative. It's all part of the same anti-Western narrative. And the colonialism stuff is, it was originally Russian propaganda that goes all the way back to the 50s. And I'm convinced that the Chinese have picked up on it as well. And so this is what they do, is they kind of they go around calling us settler or colonialist and blaming us for all the wars in the world. They only give you one side of the story, never tell you like what precipitated wars and what precipitated certain actions on the part of the West. They just look at the actions, and that's the whole story basically. So and that goes all the way back to the Crusades of 1095 AD. So all right, which were a counteroffensive, by the way. It was the West who were initially attacked when the Muslims came storming out of Arabia, and within 100 years of Muhammad's death, had an empire 3 times the size of what the Romans ever had. So, and the East, the Middle East is the Middle East of the old Roman Empire that collapsed the Eastern state. Okay, so here is the Toronto Sun. This is Kinsella. So he says, Canada suspends UNRWA funding after employees tied to October 7th butchering of Jews. But will Justin Trudeau now finally admit the United Nations and its agencies have become complicit in murder? I doubt that very much. Yeah, the UN is a huge problem. The UNRWA, I mean, they were involved in this, complicit in this, supporting this. So we've shown some clips on that in the past, but here is the article. Most Canadians believed in the idea of the United Nations. On a paper, it made sense. An international body that would promote peace and security, one that would foster better relations between countries, a place to coordinate the actions of nations to create a better world. The UN was born out of the ashes of the Second World War, phoenix-like, with the initial aim of preventing future world wars. This was a good objective. So 4 dozen nations met in San Francisco in June of 1945 and hammered out a broad principle that formed the UN Charter. There are 111 articles of the Charter collected in 19 separate phases. This is the very first one, quote, to maintain international peace and security, and to that end, to take effective collective measures for the preservation and removal of threats to the peace and for the suppression of acts of aggression or other breaches of the peace, close quote. And that is the impetus for war, and has been since the Second World War, is the declaration of a breach of the international peace and security by the UN general body. It gets handed on to the UN Security Council, and then they hand it to the Americans because the whole world is asking the Americans to go to war on their behalf. So those are the first words you see, really, that the United Nations would always strive to maintain peace and take action to prevent and remove, quote, threats to peace, close quote. So what happens when it is the United Nations itself that is violating the peace? What does it mean when the representatives of the UN, its paid staff, are actively involved in acts of aggression against innocent civilians? What then? Because that, for now, is the truly shocking news that seeped out on Friday morning when the world was distracted by a historic ruling of the International Court of Justice. that United Nations staff participating in the massacres in Israel on October 7th. Read that again because it's not made up. The United Nations staff participated in the massacre of 1,200 Israeli men, women, children, and babies on October 7th. UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, admitted it, just as the ICJ's ruling was breaking. And that was the one that was filed. A complaint of genocide was filed at the ICJ by South Africa, where there is a genocide ongoing against the white Boers there ever since the African National Congress took over. That was Nelson Mandela's terrorist organization back in the day. That's why he went to prison. It wasn't because of racism or anything like that. But that's, as you can see, that's all part of the progressive narrative. It's communist. They're progressively communist. Here are the words of Philip Lazzarini, UNRWA's Commissioner General. Quote, the Israeli authorities have provided UNRWA with information about the alleged involvement of several UNRWA employees in the horrific attacks on Israel on 7 October. To protect the agency's ability to deliver humanitarian assistance, I have taken the decision to immediately terminate the contracts of these staff members and launch an investigation in order to establish the truth without delay. Any UNRWA employee who was involved in attacks of terror will be held accountable, including through criminal prosecution, close quote. And they were using the UNRWA schools in Palestine as command posts as well. Lazzarini then, quote, condemns in the strongest terms, close quote, what happened to Israeli civilians on October 7th, and says a few words asking for the return of all remaining Israeli hostages. But again, it is important to note that UNRWA made their admission when they knew everyone would be focused on the stunning ruling of the International Court of Justice, which, against the exceptions of most, declined to declare that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians, because they're not. It's a counter-terrorist operation, and I know that they're taking down an awful lot of buildings and stuff like that. This is just what a war looks like. When you're reading about this, just ask yourself, like, are they trying to appeal to my intellect or to my emotions right now? Because if they're trying to appeal into your emotions, then it's propaganda. And I've shown the stats by Hamas's own numbers here. The health department in Gaza is Hamas, and even by their own numbers, the civilian casualties are still only about 1/6 the global average for the 21st century. Air mission per air mission. So that's as precise as ever been in history. So it's not a genocide. And I think what the court actually ruled was Israel should take steps to prevent a genocide, which is like something that was already happening. And all of the hostages should be released, which is the goal of the operation here. So it's all lining up. Why cover up? Why try to take out the trash, just as journalists put it on Friday? Because UNRWA and the United Nations know the damage has been done, and the damage is irreparable. 12 of their employees helped to murder, maim, and kidnap Israelis. The Israelis have been raising the alarm about UNRWA for a long time. But as with most things at the United Nations, nobody really listened to them. Yeah, that's standard. That's why I never did a United Nations mission. Everybody always said, like, they don't listen and they don't give you ammo. So about a week ago, to cite just one example, international human rights lawyer Hillel Noor's UN watchdog told the international body that 3,000 UNRWA employees were active on a Telegram feed, quote, replete with praise of the Hamas massacre of October 7th, close quote. UNRWA and the UN shrugged. They didn't care. One of that group, United Nations employee 30026166, Saif al-Najjar, was an administrator for the group. She regularly praises Hamas, calling them, quote, holy warriors, close quote. Another UNRWA employee, Weem Majdi Kaloub, praised massacres of Jews, and on and on. So many Jew haters, there is not enough room to name and shame them. All of that is bad enough. All of a sudden, it should be sufficient cause for concern. But then Israel provided the United Nations with proof that its own employees had actually helped to butcher Jews. The United States immediately announced it was stopping funding of UNRWA. Canada, which has provided UNRWA with $90 million between 2019 and 2023, must now do likewise. And to the surprise of many, we did late Friday. Because of the fence setting for which the Trudeau regime has become so notorious, it was doubtful. But they did the right thing. so good. But we can now expect to finally admit that sad and shocking truth, which is that the United Nations and its agencies have become complicit in murder, and that, like all murderers, they deserve to be punished because they do not deserve to be funded or supported anymore. No, the authoritarians run the United Nations, and there's a block of about 80 countries there called the Organization of Islamic Countries. They all vote together for the same thing, to push like blasphemy laws on the rest of us, so on and so forth. There was a resolution that we called the blasphemy resolution back in 2009 that I believe formed the impetus for M103 to condemn Islamophobia by Iqra Khalid with her Muslim Brotherhood ties. And here's Dr. Eli David, and he says, this is an unfired bullet, which begs the question. Okay, well, I'll read this part first. So he is retweeting Quds News Network. So Quds is, well, I mean, Al-Quds is the terrorist organization there in that Qasem Soleimani ran in Iran. And they have proxies all over the region. But it says, displaced citizens sheltering in Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis shared a photo of Israeli sniper bullets fired at the hospital. And as Dr. Eli is pointing out, he says, this is an unfired bullet, which begs the question, why they have sniper bullets at Nasser Hospital in Gaza. And he's giving the little clown there. Yeah, exactly. They use their hospitals, schools, playgrounds. I've shown all the footage here before. For bases of operations because they want the civilian casualties. Hamas wants the civilian casualties so they can get that propaganda win. And they can say, look at all these civilian casualties, evil Israel, and manipulate you by your emotions, because that is how propaganda works. It manipulates your emotions. Okay. So yeah, that's where that's at right now. Now, here is something that was going around and everybody was really upset about it. Torah Judaism says the Zionist genocidal state of Israel killed more than 25,000 Palestinians. They destroyed Gaza, and people are dying of hunger because of Zionists. But the Zionists shamelessly shoot such fake videos in Gaza, which they occupied, and present them to the world, trying to show that they are the most moral army in the world. Zionist propaganda is so disgusting and full of immorality. Well, as I just showed you, like it's the Hamas side that's really propagandizing. I'm looking at this video, like people are outraged about it, and you tell me, I mean, what exactly is going so terribly wrong here? Other than the fact that they're in a war zone, and that's always terribly wrong. But it's a fact of life that war is a fact of life. So if you're just listening, this is an IDF soldier, and they have a child who is pretty clearly Gazan, kind of huddled into their side here, and this child has no shoes, and this Israeli soldier, while there's gunfire somewhere off in the distance, is standing there just kind of consoling this child and giving him a little pat on the back. It looks like there's somebody behind them here as well. Maybe this is a dead body. You can see somebody's feet. So it's a really tragic scene. But I've shown other footage too, where Israeli soldiers are trying to lead children out of harm's way in Gaza, and sometimes they're freaking out because they hate the IDF, and that's what they teach them in their schools. They hate the Jews. But what is the abuse here? What is so outrageous? It's a terrified child being consoled by a soldier in a war zone. So there's really nothing I think the Jews can do that would ever appease these people. I don't think they're interested in the truth, really. Much like our own leadership, right? This is how the authoritarians work. It's always everybody else's fault. Okay, and here is National Compost, and they say Greta Thunberg accuses Israel of genocide. Palestine will be free. The 21-year-old Swedish activist wrote on social media that, quote, we cannot remain silent during a genocide. Okay, so just in case, and this is as of this morning, by the way, it's January 30th, 2024, but just in case you had any doubts as to the fact that the pro-Palestine crowd are really just progressives who hate the West, and this is all part of the progressive narrative, here's Greta Thunberg to really stump for that, to really drive that point home for us. So It says, as the International Court of Justice in The Hague prepared to announce its verdict on South Africa's charge of Israel committing genocide on January 26th, Greta Thunberg posted a photo of herself with a keffiyeh wrapped around her neck and holding a sign stating, quote, Palestine will be free, close quote. The 21-year-old Swedish activist who rose to fame calling attention to climate change wrote on social media that we cannot remain silent during a genocide, close quote. Yeah. Quote, Israel, as well as those who support Israel's brutal attacks and occupation must be held accountable for their actions, close quote, she wrote. Quote, I seem to have missed your protests calling for the release of hostages, close quote, wrote Yari Cohen, who works at Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yeah, that's a great question. You want to return the hostages? If you want the IDF to back off, then you could just return the hostages and Hamas could just surrender. But they're not going to do that. They're exploiting those people. They're exploiting the Gazans to get their propaganda wins and to keep this war going. And in every ceasefire, it's always the case that they really just use those ceasefires to reconstitute, build strength so they can attack them again. Former Knesset member Einaf Wilf wrote, quote, another perfect example of my claim that anti-Zionism is the mark of failed entities using the world's most reliable scapegoat to divert attention. It seems Greta reached a dead end with her efforts to mobilize the world on climate change, so she chose the path of least resistance, close quote. Thunberg recently said at a protest in Leipzig, Germany, that, quote, to stand with Palestine is to be a human. Yeah, that's it. The left, they're always the good guys. And that is really how they think. It's like they're just these crazy right-wing IMVE extremists. Well, that's extremist, but IMVE guys. And then there's everybody else. So yeah, whenever somebody tells me, you know, yeah, no, I'm not really political. I just kind of think, oh yeah, that means you're on the left. You're indoctrinated in this idea that you're just a moral person because you believe all these leftist tropes. Here is Andy Lee, and she's saying the quote unquote independent senators you keep on appointing sure do seem to contribute to an awful lot of money to your party. And she's retweeting Justin Trudeau, who says, he's saying Mohammed Al-Zaibak has been appointed as an independent senator. His business and philanthropic experience, combined with his community leadership in diversity and inclusion, will only make the Senate better. Learn more about Canada's newest senator here. And Andy Lee is keeping us very well informed of what's really going on with our senators. And Al Zaibak, I think that's him there. So he supported Ignatieff. Looks like he gave him $1,000, and here is another $1,000. So these are all the same guy, and it's like $250, $1,000, $439, $1,372, $1,500. So he's been, and this goes. Let's see, this is from December 31st, 2005 to December 3rd, 2006. So, geez, man, he seems to be like December, May, December. So he is donating all over the place. And here is 2006 to 2013. We can see there's a whole other roster of donations ranging from $1,500 down to, well, there's $1,575 down to $240. So yeah, that's what's going on with our unelected Senate right now. They're all just loyalists. And definitely, I think if there's one thing that we need it's Senate reform. We need an elected Senate, much like they have down in the United States there. Here is PP, and he is saying sometimes he makes it too easy. So this was an exchange between Poilievre and Trudeau in the House of Commons here recently.
While the Conservative leader is muzzling his own caucus and putting himself first, we'll keep putting Canadians.
He walked. No. This one is just too easy. He walked into it. He had to muzzle a member from Newfoundland who called for an end to his leadership, joining another senator who did the same, because they understand that their constituents are literally starving and unable to heat their homes because the Prime Minister is quadrupling the carbon tax, doubling housing costs, and giving the worst inflation in 40 years. Why won't he listen to, instead of intimidating his member for Newfoundland, and put his leadership up to a review for...
Okay. And Larry is saying, is this why 99% of cities with ports of trade are liberal? No, it's the reason that they are liberal is because they are ports of trade. And that liberalism is a consequence of cosmopolitanism. So the more prosperous society, the more cosmopolitan it gets. And really like peak cosmopolitanism is the harbinger of state collapse. That's something I showed Camille Paglia talking about on the podcast here before. She's an art historian who talks about like all of these different civilizations. What you see in the art is this trend away from the aesthetic, from the masculine and the feminine to this androgyny, and right at about the time they value the androgyny like we see in the cosmopolitan areas right now. That is right at about the time that states are collapsing and the barbarians are at the gates and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. Okay, and here is Bill Senate S210. So before you get too excited about whatever headway the conservatives are making right now, of course, I don't support them. I say that all the time. I find, well, there was only one party that stood against all these mandates, and the only one who stands against the medicalization of our children, especially through the sexually butchery into permanent medical patients to provide big pharma with livestock, is the PPC. That's who I support, and it's just a matter of principle. And it's hard to say that I'm a partisan since they're a brand new party, but I did vote conservative before that. I voted for PP twice because I was his constituent when I was in Ottawa during my last posting. But after he voted to jail any parent who tries to protect their child from such sexual butchery with Bill C4, I was like, yeah, I think you guys are all the same. Okay, so getting away from that. But this is Senate Bill S210. I think I talked about this previously, but this is the one that they're pushing through to keep minors from getting access to pornography online. And what is troubling about this is the regulations. Okay, so here are the regulations. It says the governor and council may make regulations for carrying out purposes and provisions of this act, including regulations prescribing age verification methods referred to in subsection 1. So they're saying age verification message. Before prescribing an age verification method under subsection 1, the governor and council must consider whether the method is reliable, maintains user privacy, and protects user personal information, collects and uses personal information solely for age verification purposes, except to the extent required by law, destroys any personal information collected for age verification purposes once the verification is completed, and generally complies with the best practices in the fields of age verification and privacy protection. So this sounds an awful lot like a gateway to a digital ID. Like if you have to start showing ID to get onto these porn sites, not that I'm recommending that you look at porn. It's not good for you guys. I don't look at it. And but yeah, I think that people are going to have a real issue providing ID in order to get to these sites. And it does seem to be this kind of information mining and totally nanny state as well. I mean, parents can have all kinds of technology at their fingertips to regulate what their kids can and can't see. It's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but that's why you got to talk to kids about what's going on in the world as well. And they mentioned that the age verifications are referred to in section 6.1. And so that is, let me see, 11, 10, 6.1, age verification. It is not a defense for a charge under Section 5 that an organization believed that the young person referred to in that section was at least 18 years of age, unless the organization implemented a prescribed age verification method to limit access to the sexually explicit material made available for commercial purposes to individuals who are at least 18 years of age. So this is one that's being pushed by the conservatives, and it looks very big brother to me. Here is Kimbo on Twitter, X, whatever, and they're saying, I just wanted to give this as kind of the typical progressive position here. It says, Harper had the worst economic record of any PM since World War XI. Harper has the worst job creation record of any PM since 1946. Harper steered Canada's economy to the lowest levels of growth in 69 years. Press Progress 2015 reporting. Yeah, okay. So it's Press Progress reporting, which is a progressive propaganda outlet. Pierre will not be better. Never vote conservative. Oh, all right, let's get a look at some of this stuff. So here is macrotrends.com, Canada GDP per capita, 1960 to 1924. Okay, so I set it to a 20-year time scale. And the Harper admin came in, was it 2004? It was early 2000s. So I think it was right around 2003, 2004. Well, let me see. They did 10 years, right? So I better double check that, guys. I'm brain farting on it. But when was Harper elected Prime Minister? So February 6, 2006. Okay, so 2006. And now the one thing that I think that escapes this person making this tweet here was that he also was prime minister during the global financial collapse after the mortgage bond market collapsed. It was all just a big bubble, and once the people who created the bubble got to the top of that pyramid, then being the boomer generation in particular, everything underneath it was just a bubble and a burst, and the whole system came down globally. And we actually did really well here in Canada. I remember being posted to Florida from 2010 to 2014, and the dollar was at parity and even a little bit above at times. So my dollar went really far in the United States during that period of 2010 to 2014, like the last years of Harper's career, his tenure. So they're saying that everything went to crap under Harper. So he comes in 2006. This is GDP per capita, and we can see that it does go down. And here's the big collapse right here. And then right after that, this is the big collapse right after 2008. So this is 2008. Kaboom. There's the negative growth of 12.49%. 2008. 2010, we got a positive 16.36%. So after that global financial collapse where everything tanked and went into the negative of 12.49%. It came all the way back to the positive of 16.36%. So, and I think I said growth, but this isn't growth. This is GDP per capita. So, yeah, that's a delta, an improvement over the course of like 2 years. And this is really 2009. So over the course of a year, that's 12.49% versus 16.39. So that's 28.85%. That's an enormous leap from 1 year to the next. And then it dips down here around 2012. And as we can see, 2014, it takes a dump. But in 2015, that's when Trudeau first comes in. This is the biggest dump. Like on this whole graph, this is the biggest dump of all. This is worse than the global financial collapse of 2008. That was only negative 12.49%, whereas 2015, it went down 14.44%. And then we have negative in 2016, coming back into the positives here. And we have another negative here, 2019, and in 2020, it's another negative. Now, big bounce back here in 2021, but I think when we're talking about that, like this is GDP per capita, so it's just like GDP divided by the number of people, and a lot of that is coming from the finance sector. A lot of that is coming from the kind of soaking up of the wealth that a lot of the corporations did. Like a lot of people made a lot of money. Fortune magazine reported that the boomer generation, according to Fed data in the United States, just the US boomer generation is $14 trillion richer after the pandemic. So I bet you that is concentrated in the hands of the boomer generation predominantly, but they don't break this stuff down by demographic. So, and here is Canada inflation rate, and I've got it set for the last 20 years. And pretty much the same thing. So here's Harper coming in at negative 21% inflation. And we got about I'm looking at This is annual change here. Was I doing the same thing there before? I might have been looking at that wrong. Oh, I am looking at it all wrong. Here is, I've got to go back to this graph. Sorry about that, guys, but they're showing the change down here at the bottom, and we can see the trend overall. So from 2006, carries up, 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 crash comes in, boom, down a little bit. I was looking at that all wrong, sorry. But it goes up to about, prior to the crash, it's at about 46,711 GDP per capita, crashes to about 40,876 GDP per capita, and then it continues to climb, levels off here at about 2012, carries forward with a little bit of a downturn there in 2014, and then we got the Trudeau regime come to power, and it takes a dip down by that negative 14.44% to 43,596. And then we've got it's staying below that peak at the end of the Harper years, and then really dipping down again to almost this level here, 40,876 during the financial collapse. It's about 43,350. And then it takes that sharp climb here. Again, I'm going to say that that's probably concentrated in the hands of the rich. But here is the inflation rate. Moving on. I kind of fudged that last one, my bad. But here is the inflation rate, 2003 to 2024. 2006, inflation was 2%. We see that it crashes in 2009, just post collapse, by it goes down by 2.07%. So it's about 0.3% inflation in that year, and then it climbs back up to about 2.91%. Kind of bounces around from 1% to the 2% range, and starts to climb above 2 here in 2018, crashes down in 2020 to 0.72%, and then 2021 it's up to 3.4%, 2022 6.8%. Holy smokes. So we can expect that to continue to climb. So whatever the heck these people are talking about, Harper had the worst economic record of any PM since World War XI. It just doesn't seem to bear itself out in the data. All right. Here is Colin Rugg, and he says, new E. Jean Carroll's lawyer, visibly uncomfortable as she boasts about what she is going to spend all her money on. So this E. Jean Carroll one was, she's the one who, I think she's suing Trump for defamation now, but it was this, she was the one who tried making the rape allegation there. And then when she went on Anderson Cooper, she was like, oh, I think that rape is kind of sexy or something like that. It was super weird. And there was Tucker kind of going, or not Tucker, but Anderson Cooper going, what the heck? You could really see it on him. But here she is now, another cringy video from this same person who was engaged in all this lawfare against Donald Trump.
You've talked about using some of Trump's money that you're about to get to help shore up women's rights. Do you know what that might be, what that might look like?
Yes, Rachel. Yes.
Tell me.
I had such great ideas for all the good I'm going to do with this money. First thing, Rachel, you and I are going to go shopping. We're going to get completely new wardrobes, new shoes, motorcycle for Crowley, new fishing rod for Robbie. Rachel, what do you want? Penthouse? It's yours,
Nothing.
Rachel. Penthouse and France? You want France? You want to go fishing in France? No? Oh, all right, okay.
That's a joke.
All right, okay.
That's a joke.
Although if me fishing in France could do something for women's rights, I would take the hit. I would obviously take one for the team. All right, let me as if you need persuasion in that regard.
That is so awkward. You can see just how cringy everybody feels right now. Yeah, that just goes to show you what a bunch of batshit crazy people these are. And lawfare is another one of the prongs in the fifth generation warfare that the CCP is currently inflicting on us. Here's Charlie Kirk, and he's tweeting out, quote unquote, Melody Weishart is a 50-year-old Canadian man who is crisscrossing Canada to enter women's swimming events where he is able to compete against teenage girls as young as 13. According to reports, Weishart, a name as fake as his gender, uses the girls' locker room at all levels and changes clothes alongside girls. Parents have reportedly been so uncomfortable that they have constructed makeshift towel tents to help their daughters change into their swimsuits. In response, Canada has been deploying police at swim meets to make sure that quote unquote Melody can access these girls' locker rooms without difficulty. Our northern neighbor has driven itself off a cliff. Yeah, this is how the world sees us. So there's Charlie Kirk, and he is Turning Point USA. So pretty influential account as well. There's Libs of TikTok. New Groomer book just dropped. Growing Up, aimed at 6 to 8-year-olds, teaches that doctors assign a sex when a baby is born and can be wrong. It also includes a glossary of words like quote unquote wet dream, which teaches kids about erections. Watch as author Rachel Greener barely containing her excitement while showing sex scenes and naked people in her other book for kids to look at. Yeah. So again, this is all kind of within the same narrative, and we're into this medical tyranny at this point. Where even no, that's not coming up for me, guys. But let me just go ahead and hit play on it and see what we can get.
Of a sperm and egg donation, IVF, surrogacy, adoption.
Hang on, I'll do it this way. So here's Growing Up. This is the cover, an inclusive guide to puberty and your changing body. And here are some extra questions you might have. What is a person's sex? When a baby is born, a doctor or midwife looks to see whether the baby has a penis or a vulva. Babies that have a penis are called boys, males. Babies that have a vulva are called females. This is called their biological sex. As babies get older and become children, they start to understand more about themselves and who they are. Lots of people will feel like the sex they were given when they were born is the right one for them. Some people might feel that they weren't given the right sex when they were born. You're not given, your sex is observed, it's not assigned. For example, they might have been called a girl when they were born, but actually they know they are a boy. Now, how do you know that? That's always the question, right? How do you verify that? Or they might have been called a boy when they were born, but they know they are a girl. Some people will feel like they are not a boy or a girl at all, and their feelings might change from day to day. Feeling like a boy or a girl, or neither or both, is called a person's gender identity. Everyone has a gender identity. Some people will know what their gender identity is when they are very young, and some people might only feel sure when they are a teenager or a grown-up. Okay, so this is marketed to 6 to 8-year-olds, and feeling discomfort with your gender is kind of a normal stage of puberty, or at least that's what we learned in school when I was going through it. And so what they've done here is they basically pathologized puberty. And here you see the glossary. They've got everything and all the redefinition of words. Wet dream, womb. They're talking about this with
Some of the spreads of the book. We kind of pull.
Okay.
Some of the spreads of the book. We kind of pull the information out into a sort of roundel, so like a sort of device to hold the scientific information. So here we've got lots of naked people, for example. I'm not, but you can see the kind of cross section of a womb and of a penis, so you can understand the kind of technology. And we do have a page where there are people having sex, and there is a roundel that kind of explains what's happening. Mm-hmm. But for very young children that read this, those images that they're beyond them, they don't really understand them. All they do is they look at the sort of broader pictures, which are more narrative, and they ask questions around those images. So we cover sex, we cover intrauterine insemination, we cover sperm and egg donation, IVF, surrogacy, adoption. And we also, as well as discussing all of these topics and looking at how a baby grows and also how it's born, so a vaginal birth versus a C-section, for example, which isn't really covered in many other books. We also...
Right. So the medical tyrants march on, folks. And speaking of the march and those tyrants, oh my God. So here is Libs of TikTok, and they say, the quiet part out loud. And they got the quote there. I'll just go ahead and say it. This is board member, Rhode Island School District, wants to hide information from parents about their kids, including if their child comes out as LGBTQ. So check this out.
I don't think parents should be notified simply because
I don't think parents should be notified simply because
society assumes that every child has a well-meaning family culture that is accepting of this. Sometimes the worst thing you can do is involve a parent in some of these issues based on their own beliefs and their own culture. And that will cause that student to commit suicide. If you tell a student who's trusted you, who has come out to say that I'm lesbian, and you now go back and tell the parent, that child has no faith in that school system ever again and will never come forward with any information. And
they sure want to talk to the kids about their sexuality, don't they? And this is the fear mongering that they engage in. This is what they've been doing for years now. And they've trained this generation of psychologists like to use this kind of verbiage when they say, like, would you rather have a living son or a dead daughter? As in, if you don't transition your kid, then they're going to commit suicide. And they never provide any data or any evidence to support these notions. But that is the line that they'll use.
And his second recommendation, or the third recommendation, or where is it here, that they should have documentation from their parent or their physician or their guidance counselor. I can tell you for a fact, as a medical provider, I would never have provided that documentation to the school, because it does appear that now you're segregating out this child, and you're trying to say that this is a disability. This is who they are. And this is not like to set up even an IEP for them or anything. You're now saying that what you're doing has a stigma to it and it's wrong. Look at what the disabled students go through for normalization. These kids are normal. This is just who they are. That's just the way it is. So my point would be that we never notify a parent on these issues unless the child's life is in danger. And then I think we have to err on the side of implied consent, that if we need to, we have to. If I know this student truly is is suicidal, they've attempted, yeah, I'm going to notify the parents. Actually, you're not probably notifying anybody. The hospital and the emergency services are going to handle all of that. But I don't think we should notify parents on many issues that we notify parents on.
Yeah, so they don't think they should notify any parents with respect to these issues that impact their child's well-being. This is typical grooming behavior. It's our little secret. We're going to talk about your sexuality and all your fetishes. I want you to tell me all that stuff. And this is our little secret. Don't tell your parents about this because you might get in trouble. So creepy progressive dogma. Here we go. Libs of TikTok again, terrifying. So this is what they'll do to you. This is part of the this is all to medicalize the children and big profits for big pharma. And if you stand between them and their profits, this is what happens. So Libs of TikTok says, terrifying. CPS showed up, that's Child Protective Services, showed up to this family's home and took their 14-year-old daughter away after the parents opposed her gender transition. The state took custody of the teen and the parents weren't allowed to see her. They were also excluded from her medical care, and she was reportedly given vaccines without her parents' consent. This was not in California, in New York. This was in Montana. That is incredible that this is going on even in a rural place like Montana. And there is the pictures. It says, let's see, 10 minutes later, Child and Family Services arrived at the Colston residence with police. Quote, they showed up at our home to serve us with papers to take Jennifer out of our care, close quote. Krista says, quote, they told me that the reason was that we were unable or refusing to provide medical care. That's just not true, close quote. But that's the gender affirming care model. That's the model that we have here in Canada. The idea is to affirm the child's identified gender by medically transitioning them. And they're permanent medical patients with a shortened lifespan, so it's hardly care, but it sure is big bucks. The next day, August 23, Jennifer was transported to Wyoming. Despite the fact that Krista and Todd were not allowed to see Jennifer during her move, CFS did allow Jennifer to stop and see friends and coworkers prior to leaving the city. Krista would later find out that Jennifer had told her friends that she was, quote, crazy and trying to kill herself, close quote, and was being taken away from her parents. They're teaching them this. They're teaching the kids all this stuff. This is the new cool thing. And you know, they're even fetishizing suicide in the process. So here is antihate.ca, which is basically the progressive smear machine modeled on the Southern Poverty Law Center down in the US that's now been imported to Canada. And the title is International Trans Bullying Campaign Targets Canadian Teacher. A woman from Edmonton and the Libs of TikTok account have targeted a transgender and non-binary teacher and their school board in BC. So this was Blonde Bigot on X there. And she was posting about a teacher at her school who was posting her own pictures. A transgender identified man, a natal female who had a double mastectomy and was posting pictures of herself in the bathtub, showing the scars, you know, because they're trying to make it real cool for the kids. So she was calling her out, and now she's being targeted by antihate.ca. I don't think I need to waste any time reading the article, especially given the revelations around HateGate. I think it's well understood now. These guys were right at the center of like the Emergencies Act stuff, where even the police were relying on their information, or well, the press was relying on information coming out of them, and the police were relying on the press. And all kinds of stuff. So they should be soon into non-existence, and they follow me on Twitter as well. So I guess that's a badge of honor, really. Yeah, this is the kind of progressive smear machine, and they're going after this woman now for, you know, standing up for children. That's what they'll do. And here is Kurt Phillips of the ARC Collective, the Anti-Racism Canada, and he is also was a board member of antihate.ca. It says founder of ARC and board member of antihate.ca. And here is Eliza Hategan. It's an unfortunate name, but she says, a thread of my history with Kurt Phillips and why I wonder if he or someone associated with him is behind the anti-Semitic hate messages I've received from Estevan, Saskatchewan. And she's got a really good thread here. I'll do a little bit, and but you guys can go and check out the rest of it yourselves. It says, the population of Estevan, Saskatchewan is only 13,000 people. I wonder who might have reason to send me threats and anti-Semitic emails. I'm averaging 1 to 3 hate emails per day, all because I sued your comrades. How can you call yourselves human rights defenders when you just want me dead? And this is a customer contact message for her. Has sent a message through, and they're contacting first and last name Ghost of Meyer Kane. Comments. So here is the I guess the report that she's sending. It says comments. We still know all about you and your current exploits. No amount of fake ass certificates from some online rabbi is going to make you a Jew. You're nothing more than a Nazi rat who snitched on your Nazi friends to save yourself. Yeah. So this is what she's saying is the result of her interactions with Kurt Phillips, antihate.ca. And then we have the next one in the thread. We first connected after I left a comment on his Anti-Racist Canada blog in 2011. A correspondence followed, which grew into friendship. At the time, Kurt called himself my quote-unquote fanboy and credited me with being a key individual to bring down the Heritage Front. And here is the some of the correspondence that she's posting here. It says, and she's got underlined, you more than anyone else took down one of the nastiest hate groups that had existed in Canada in years. That's the Heritage Front that they're talking about there. So that was the white supremacist movement back in the 90s. That was also never really would have been a thing without CSIS being involved. Yeah, I don't think it didn't actually result in people going to, well, it was at the end of the day, I think functionally a false flag. So a big frame up. But there were people, I guess, that subscribed to certain white supremacist views who got kind of taken into it. And here she is again. She says, he deleted this post after I sued his friends. Quote, Hagan, who has, Hadigan, I guess is probably the way to say it. Hadigan, who did more to take down the front than any Canadian government agency ever could. Elise's testimony essentially killed the Heritage Front as a viable movement in Canada and exposed the activities of CSIS to public examination. So there she is tweeting out the graphic. And so they're quite proud of what she's done. But then he said, here we go. Kurt wrote a 5-star review for my book, Race Trader, under the handle, quote unquote, John Smith, citing me as, quote, the key figure in taking down the leadership, close quote. Over the years, he sent me several gift packages and contributed to hundreds of dollars to my fundraising. His mother also funded my campaigns. Kurt visited me in Toronto in 2013. We spent 2 days hanging out, and I told him to all the old Heritage Front haunts, such as Zundal's house and the apartment building where Wolfgang Droege was shot dead. He promised that if I ever needed him, he'd drop everything to be there for me. Yeah, that sounds like something he would say. We were all very close friends. I shared deeply personal things, such as my history of suicide attempts and parental physical / sexual abuse. We called each other family. I was suicidal for much of 2015 and barely hung on. I drank to numb the pain and spiraled into a worsening depression. And she's showing the chats between them to that effect. And she says, throughout our friendship, I was part of the ARC Collective and privy to Kurt's sleuthing tactics, which included LARPing as a Russian model named Anya and playing Nazi on Nazi websites to extract intel such as Paul Fromm's X-rated erotica stories, which may have been written for Anya. Oh, jeez. So when someone threatened me on Facebook, Kurt gallantly volunteered to, quote, make some calls, close quote, and, quote, give him a reason to be frightened, close quote. I hadn't seen that side of Kurt, but hints appeared when he shared plans to buy a silicone skinhead mask in order to cosplay a skinhead in online forums. I broke up our friendship in December of 2015, shortly before attempting suicide in January 2016. I had a breakdown. My mother was dying, and I had no support or relatives in Canada. From what I recall, Kurt's response was a sad face emoji. He didn't call. I realized that he didn't care about me. No, none of these people care about you. They're just using you. Under the influence of alcohol and ready to jump off a bridge, I wrote him an angry, desperate email calling him an asshole and a hypocrite who made false promises. I quoted Nietzsche, reference staring too long into the abyss, and told him he was no better than the Nazis he claimed to fight. I blocked him on social media, and we didn't communicate except for a couple of emails where I pleaded with him not to endorse the fraudulent appropriation of my story, or I would speak openly about ARC. He didn't respond, but rushed to scrub all references to me in the ARC blog. Canadian Anti-Hate Network was born in 2018, and Kurt used the platform to disseminate this expertise on Canada's far right and a version of history I believe to be false. Within months, I filed a lawsuit against 2 board members. I felt I had no choice but to name him in an affidavit I uploaded to Scribd. 3 weeks later, following an appearance on CBC Fifth, I guess that's the Fifth Estate, where his face was inadequately blurred, his identity was revealed on Kiwi Farms. Kurt blamed me entirely for the docs. This was the beginning of a harassment campaign by trolls associated with Canadian Anti-Hate Network that continues to this day. After his identity was revealed, Kurt was featured in a high-profile MSM interview, gained thousands of Twitter followers, and was lauded as a that's a Canadian Anti-Hate Network board member. He also incurred threats and harassment as is the nature of our work, but the benefits he acquired cannot be overstated. Kurt seemed to take personally my lawsuit against fellow Canadian Anti-Hate Network board members, including Chair Bernie Faber, yeah, we all know that name, he claimed to get their permission before lashing out in a hateful rant about me in March of 2022, praising judge's decision to deny me the right to appeal a summary judgment ruling. Although he deleted his posts soon after, thousands of followers saw, liked, and retweeted his lies. As Kurt's fame and popularity grew as a quote-unquote expert on the far right, me, a woman who risked my life to shut down a hate group, was smeared as a Nazi. The armchair activist became the hero. Following its inception, the Canadian Anti-Hate Network appears to have acquired a constellation of vicious Antifa Twitter trolls and cyber harassers operating mostly in anonymity who have harassed, threatened, and intimidated me and others who called out for transparency and evidence-based accountability. The attack dogs clustered around Kurt and the people I sued engaged in what I view as attempts to bully side on behalf of their quote-unquote comrades. They degraded me, mocked my pleas for them to stop, derided my history of suicidal ideation, and sent me threats on Twitter, my blog, and website. Yeah, they will say anything. They're just as cruel as they can possibly be. Here are some of the tweets that she's showing here. A serious person would be accessing the help they need and deserve, not fail doxing repeatedly with the 3-day period whilst blaming others for their behavior. That's manipulation. Most people I know, these are Antifa accounts, most people I know who've been seriously at risk aren't making a big show of it on Twitter to thousands of followers to encourage targeted harassment while lying through their teeth and making themselves into some martyr for attention and retweeting their failed doxes nonstop for days. Okay. All right. I think you get the idea there, guys. This goes on. Well, let's see this one. This one is a judicial hearing. So they say they took a judicial ruling unrelated to my past. My history of shutting down the Heritage Front was never questioned or under scrutiny and spun it off as evidence that I am a liar, Nazi, unhinged, lying about being suicidal and about being Jewish. And she's retweeting herself here. More anti-Semitism from Antifa trolls. I am not half Jew. My father was Jewish and I converted. My ancestry was confirmed in 2012, but in the 90s, Heritage Front neo-Nazis said I, quote, looked like a Jew, close quote. As a child, my grandmother kept kosher and told me stories. I denied my roots because of self-hate. Yeah, that's just terrible. So that is where a lot of the anti-Semitism seems to be coming from right now. It is coming from the left. It's not the right these days. It's definitely coming from the progressives, the Antifa, and the pro-Hamas crowd. Here is Blonde Bigot herself, and she's talking about targeting is bad, but only if it's against liberals. If it's against one of us by groups like Anti-Hate, it's fine. I hate this little weirdo so much. And this is the video. Alexandra Lavoie is putting this out there, and this is the video. Stephen Guilbeault responding to Danielle Smith's criticism of him at the Tucker Carlson event. Here we go.
I mean, this goes beyond me and the fact that I was targeted last night at this event. This increases political violence against everyone who runs for office in this country, whether they're doing it at the municipal level, at the provincial level, or at the federal level. As my friend and colleague Randy said, like, we can have differences of opinion. We can bang our fist on the table when we meet. We can have strong disagreement, but to incite violence against people who disagree with you, that's not how things should be done in Canada.
Are you not contributing to the divide by coming out here and comparing Poilievre to this and making this about him? Are you not contributing to the divide by doing that? If your government has been accused,
we're not comparing Poilievre to him. I think what
you're not. Have you looked at your own advertising from
Mr. What Mr. Rodriguez just said is he said I'm asking Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the opposition, to condemn those hateful and violent statement by Tucker Carlson.
How are you not comparing? Hateful statements, eh? That was Rebel News. Yeah, I mean, what exactly was it that he said that was incitement to violence? Well, they don't say that. I think they said it was the target on the back, the crosshairs and stuff like this, but it's just absurd. And it's cry bullying, right? They're absolutely vicious people. But they sure don't like the taste of their own medicine. So here's Cora, and she says, this is how they treat their own. Imagine what they will do to you. Yeah, that is the thing. And this person is something like an apostate. The one I was just showing the thread from there, she is something like an apostate. And the penalty for apostates is death. Although these days the pitchforks are digital and financial. But the flames are still very real. Here's Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Environment. And this is a parody account. It says, today when I woke up, I quickly said my daily prayer to Saint Suzuki and jumped out of bed to look out the window to see if the planet had melted yet. Surprisingly, it hadn't. I'll look again tomorrow. As I slipped on my climate-friendly organic coconut fiber slippers, I remembered with a glowing sense of foreboding and dread the stochastic speech by Tucker Carlson yesterday. Carlson is a transphobic, anticlimactic bigot who whipped typical common IQ deficient rednecked Albertans into a frenzy yesterday by uttering out loud thoughts which do not align with the government's vision. We all know what happens to a free and open democracy when just anyone can say things without dear leaders' approval. It leads to the destruction of public safety and free speech. I myself feel personally threatened by Tucker and his hordes of followers. It's frightening to think that I live in a country where people simply think differently than I and the rest of the elite governing class do, and get away with it. When I went to the kitchen and made myself some toast with my solar toaster, to pass the time as I waited for the 60 minutes before my toast was ready, slightly warm but not brown, I headed for my daily cold shower with recycled water from my toilet bowl. When I came out of the shower, it happened. I felt as though the universe erupted in laughter. It was manic, infectious, intimidating laughter with a tinge of insanity. I froze like a trucker's bank account. Who was this? My wife wasn't even home. Then I understood this was but the beginning. Tucker Carlson has unleashed the power of millions of common, ordinary Canadians. He has stochastically incited them to rise up against their intellectual and moral superiors. For so long, Canada has thrived under the shared understanding that opinions not approved by the Ministry of Truth are literal terrorism. Now there is something different in the air. Common Canadians are becoming emboldened. They are mocking me and my rational solutions to fight the climate by destroying Alberta's economy. They no longer care that unapproved opinions are by definition hate speech and literal violence. Shaken, I went to the kitchen and buttered my toast with organic, climate-friendly melted whale butter, harvested sustainably from the rotting carcasses of a sperm whale hit and killed by a Greenpeace boat. Then it happened. I heard a quote, honk, honk, close quote, in the street below. My heart stopped. My wrist became more limp than usual. My toast slipped from my plate and landed blubber side down on the filthy floor, which I clean only once per year to save the environment. This is the experience of fear and violence to which I have been sentenced by Danielle Smith and Tucker Carlson. The mere existence of people with wrong thought has put my life in literal danger. Enough is enough. I'm going to lash out against this bullying. Expect some very, very punitive regulations to crush Alberta any day now. The gloves are off. Yes, well done. Give that guy a follow at Bill C10, Bill_C10, Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Environment parody. He's pretty awesome. And here's Save Canada Army. There still are some people out there who are fighting for this, and Save Canada is they're very valiant warriors in this fight. They're saying Save Canada is organizing a protest and documentary in collaboration with LifeSite on February 16th. Join us and take us to the mutilation and indoctrination of children. 570 West Hunt Club Road, Nepean, Ontario. Find out more about the film here. And so here is the promotional flyer that's going down February 16th at 11 a.m. at 570 West Hunt Club Road in Nepean, Ontario. Of course, I can't go because I'm banned from the Greater Ottawa
Ontario
area.
is known to have one of the best publicly funded education systems in the world. Catholic schools have always been part of it, and we are proud of that.
Public Catholic education in Canada sucks. And I'm going to show you.
A high school student in Canada has been arrested for declaring that men and women are different.
So right now, I'm outside St. Joseph Catholic High School, the Catholic high school where Josh Alexander was a student.
Can you tell me what a mortal sin is?
Nope.
Why do we genuflect? You know the answer?
No.
No? Okay. So look at this. I'm in the land of the free, the United States of America. See what these American Catholics can teach me. You had a joke to tell us. What was that joke?
God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve.
Got it. Roll the credits. Roll the credits.
These public Catholic institutions in Canada don't know the first thing about Catholicity. Trustees can't be trusted, teachers can't teach, and students can't learn about Jesus Christ, putting their souls in jeopardy. I'm going to teach you about education over indoctrination.
Coming spring 2024 by LifeSite. All right, so good stuff on the horizon. People are fighting back against this tyranny. Here is Son of a Bench. And this is Mark Holland, Minister of Health in Trudeau's Canada, discussing being ready to offer MAID to Canadians suffering from mental health. All right, so here is this disturbing development.
I understand there's sensitivities and whatnot, but you can't say whether Canada is going to move
Well, this isn't developing, but, you know, they've been talking about this for a while, and this is where they are right now, giving an update.
forward with this or not.
Well, let me be very clear. We need more time. And I think I'll be clear on a second point, which is that on the question of whether or not there's equivalency between mental and physical suffering, I don't think there's any question that there is equivalency. The question here is one of readiness, and I can speak to the conversations that I've had with provinces and territories, with experts in the field. Although the curriculum is present, although the guidelines are set, there has not been enough time for people to be trained on them. And provinces and territories are saying their systems are not ready and need more time. Now, in terms of how much more time, as Minister Virani has said, we are going to be tabling legislation imminently. And once we table that legislation, we'll be in a position to talk exactly about timelines. But until we table that legislation, we cannot give exact timelines.
So is your intention to still move ahead with MAID for mental illness just within a longer time frame?
That's correct. I mean, the issue here is, again, not whether or not somebody, look, we're talking about, there are people who have for decades been trapped in mental torture. Being in a horrific situation where they have tried everything and exhausted all avenues, and under their own recognizance are saying that they want access to MAID. What we're saying is that in order for somebody in that,
even when they're not saying it, as we know from the testimony of multiple veterans who were offered MAID by Veterans Affairs Canada.
That intractable situation, who's in a mental health nightmare, that, you know, after trying absolutely everything, that eventually they should have that right. But the system needs to be ready, and we need to get it right. And it's clear from the conversations we have that the system is at this time not ready, and therefore need more time.
But they're still going after it. And Brian is saying, #cringe. As soon as the Liberal says, quote, "Let me be clear," close quote, "as I prepare for more lies." Yeah, I think this is part of the sophistry. And this is what we see, like when we go into fourth turnings, crisis era that occurs every 4 generations, is we see this resurgence of sophistry. And this goes like, this is just part of the human condition. And this is something that Socrates identified during his time. He fought the sophists, who were the Spartans in the proxy war during his early life. He follows the generational archetype of the nomad, the same as Gen X, in my reading anyway. And that's what happens, is we fight those proxy wars that don't really resolve to anybody's satisfaction, live through the crisis, the major crisis, as midlifers, as Socrates did during the Spartan occupation, then usher in the next era of the Enlightenment, the new high. And in our old age, while we're feeling abandoned, as Socrates was a poor man at the age of 70, we see that next generation of sophists coming up. And sophistry is basically like a bunch of, you know, highfalutin gobbledygook that's intended to bamboozle people into thinking that you're intellectually superior. It's a con, and what they do is it's kind of like, oh, well, if you can't understand it, then you're just not sophisticated enough. And I think what you're driving at here, Brian, is the "let me be clear" portion of it. That's this condescending kind of prefix that they put on every statement to kind of put people down, put them on their heels, and say, oh, you see, yeah, your small little brain can't understand my high brain, my big brain talk. So let me be clear. It's just a way of kind of, like I said, putting everybody down and making them feel stupid before they open their mouths. Like, the problem is that you're not understanding. You're not smart enough to understand. Here's Lion Advocacy, and he says, in Canada, if you interfere or impede someone from accessing medical assistance and dying, or cause them quote unquote fear, you could be arrested and put in jail for up to 10 years. That's right, folks. Jail for trying to save a life. You can't make this stuff up. No, you can't. And this is the again, the medical tyranny. And we saw with Bill C-4 how they're going to jail any parent who tries to protect their child from being sexually butchered. And all 338 MPs voted for it unanimously. He's got a screenshot from parliament.ca. Every person who commits an offense, or every person commits an offense who engages in any conduct with intent to provoke a state of fear in a person in order to impede them from obtaining health services from a health professional in order to impede them in the performance of their duties. And down here we have obstruct or interferes with access. Every person commits an offense who, without lawful authority, intentionally obstructs or interferes with another person's lawful access to a place at which health services are provided by health professionals. So, MAID being a health service provided by health professionals. If you try to interfere or talk somebody out of doing it, then you're liable for a criminal offense. And I would be very surprised if that didn't apply to anybody trying to talk a child out of biomedically gender transitioning. Here's Chief Nerd. He says, a new peer-reviewed study finds COVID-19 vaccination is strongly associated with a serious adverse safety signal of myocarditis, particularly in children and young adults, resulting in hospitalization and death. Quote, the strong signal of 5 times higher risk of myocarditis in 15-year-olds following dose 2 is indicative of a dose-response relationship. If the effects of each dose were the same, then we would expect to see the same number of reports filed following each dose. This indicates that the effects of dosing a second time may be more damaging and cumulative with each additional dose. In such cases, it is possible that myocarditis was subclinical dose 1 and became symptomatic after dose 2. The clinical implications of acute myocarditis in younger individuals as a result of uncontrolled production of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein with cardiac myocytes, myositis, and cardiac support cell are unknown. If myocarditis has developed after the first injection, then subsequent administration should be avoided at all costs. Sustained elevations of cardiac troponin, reduction in left and right ventricle function, large areas of inflammation or scar in imaging, and cardio arrhythmia, and portend a poor prognosis for the development of heart failure and cardiac death. And he's tweeting out the graphic here of that study. He's got a link somewhere. All right, I guess we can search that up at some point. But it's determinants of COVID-19 vaccine-induced myocarditis. So nothing we didn't already know around here, but drip, drip, drip. It's starting to come out in the actual medical journals, which, were very well controlled throughout all of this. So that's a positive sign. Here's Andy Lee, and she says, it appears the Vaccine Injury Support Program is being administered by RCGT, a consulting firm run by longtime Liberal donor Emilio Imbrigio. He was exposed for conflicts of interest in the past during the robocall scandal. He's donated thousands to Liberals over the years. And she's tweeting out this graphic of, it says, a search in the sole contractor involved in the robocalls investigation with the website Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton reveals that many members on their board of directors have donated money to the Liberals and Bloc Québécois, the same parties which have the most to gain in propagating any sort of robocall voter conspiracy myth, ramping up the rhetoric to the extent that some members are now being sued for slander and libel. In July 2008, Emilio Imbriglio, chair of Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton, donated $300 to the Liberals. In January 2009, he donated $1,000 to Michael Ignatieff leadership campaign. So The Vaccine Injury Support Program is being administered and delivered independently by RCGT with funding from the Public Health Agency of Canada. Decisions on individual claims are made by a committee of independent medical experts, and neither FACT nor Health Canada is involved in the decision of individual claims. And here he is. She's got all of his donations, just like she did on that previous spreadsheet that I showed here. And we've got $2,000, $1,000, $1,000, pretty consistent going from 2007 to 2009. And the reason that she's talking about this guy is because she's retweeting Eva Chipwick here, who is saying, something is seriously wrong here. The total amount allocated for the Vaccine Injury Support Program was $32,310,002, but the cost to administer the program was $20,310,002. Over 60% of the budget allocated for the vaccine injuries is going toward consultants administering the program rather than benefiting the vaccine-injured individuals. This misallocation raises concerns about the effectiveness and purpose of the program. Yeah, no kidding. She's showing the Rebel News report on this. Tamara Ugolini has been exposing it. She goes on to say that it is alarming when the program costs more than the actual payout, highlighting a significant problem. Let's take a moment to reflect on the achievements of the government that truly impress us. Are the roads, permitting, healthcare, and safety measures up to par? Unfortunately, when the government lacks accountability and has limited resources, the outcomes are often unfavorable, resulting in losses for the general public. It is crucial to acknowledge these serious issues and start looking for solutions. This will not be done for us. We must unite, voice our concerns, and advocate for a system that genuinely serves the public. And she says, thank you to Tamara Ugolini for your hard work and continued investigation on this. And I don't think, maybe I didn't have that lined up.
The Justin Trudeau Liberals have paid out nearly $11 million of compensation for injuries from the safe and effective novel COVID-19 jabs, but most of the funding allocated to the Vaccine Injury Support Program goes to the consultancy firm responsible for administering it.
I am extremely pleased that I got the AstraZeneca vaccine a number of weeks ago. Every single vaccine available in Canada has been approved by Health Canada as being both safe and effective.
So what we do not know as yet.
Yeah, based on what? And Glenn is saying, in Lemaity's farewell interview with the communist CBC, he said he was most proud of pushing through legislation to outlaw conversion therapy. So to Lemaity, grooming is okay. Undoing the grooming is illegal. Yeah, the conversion therapy bill is the one that I'm always referencing. It's Bill C4, to jail any parent who tries to protect their child from biomedical gender transition, resulting in a permanent state of medical dependency and a shortened lifespan and all kinds of suffering in between. But they say, like, according to that bill, the definition of conversion therapy involves taking a child to seek help from a qualified therapist to help resolve their gender dysphoria without the drugs and the surgery. So that's the conversion therapy. It's the talk therapy that you would get from a qualified therapist to help you feel comfortable in your own body.
Florida.
Oh, and this is okay. An update on the. This is Full Measures with Cheryl Atkinson, and they're talking about the vaccine trial data. So here we go.
Florida's Surgeon General recently called for a halt in COVID vaccines due to safety questions, while the federal government continues to heavily promote them for adults and kids alike. Today, we begin with a little-told story about COVID vaccine injuries. It's the story of Maddie, one of the children who took part in Pfizer's vaccine study on children. It's a remarkable account of what happened when Maddie got very, very sick, leading to accusations that Pfizer, the FDA, and the study leaders tried to bury her case.
All three of my kids were in the Pfizer clinical trial for 12 to 15-year-olds at Cincinnati Children's.
In summer of 2020, Stephanie DeGarry and her family learned an important clinical trial was about to be launched at nearby Cincinnati Children's Hospital. It would test Pfizer's experimental COVID-19 vaccine on 12 to 15-year-olds to see if it was safe and effective. The DeGarys, firmly pro-vaccine, didn't hesitate to let their children take part. Among 3 siblings, 12-year-old Maddie alone was chosen to get 2 doses of Pfizer's vaccine rather than a harmless placebo. It proved a fateful and debilitating roll of the dice.
Her second dose was January 20th of 2021. And that was my son's 16th birthday, literally the day. I have a picture of the 3 of them on that day. That night, in the middle of the night, that's when it all started. So it was maybe, let's just say 12 hours after her second dose.
What kinds of things did she wake up with, or was she suffering?
She just came in and asked if she could sleep in our bedroom, which was not normal. She said, I don't feel right. Can I sleep in your room? So she slept in between us. So very odd. And then in the morning, she ended up going to school just because she hates missing school, because then you have to make up the work. So by the time she came home from school, my husband called me at work and said, Maddie's having some sort of reaction. She had like what she described as electrical shocks going up and down her spine. She said she felt like her heart was being ripped out. So chest pain, she had severe abdominal pain. She was hunched over when she walked through the door. Her toes and her fingers were white, and they were like, when you touched them, they were ice cold and painful.
Did you think right away that this was probably a vaccine reaction?
100%. There was nothing wrong with her prior to that.
Before long, Maddie lost feeling in her legs. Here, she's scooting on the floor and using her hands to lift her legs. DeGary says she was shocked when the lead study doctor offered no help. She found herself reluctantly following the advice of physicians who insisted Maddie's paralysis, seizures, passing out, all of it were caused by anxiety.
I'm embarrassed how much I was brainwashed and believed them. She did cognitive behavioral.
There you go. It's about a 10-minute video there. That's about 3 minutes into it. But yeah, a lot of people are kind of, I think, awakening. Well, it's a matter of how much pain they feel, I guess. And she's talking about how brainwashed she was to believe them in the first place. So yeah, and a couple of people are commenting on, Sharon says, parents submitting their children to a vaccine trial. Yeah, I mean, wouldn't be me. And Matt says, psycho parents. Yeah, definitely would not be me. I think that, more and more people are waking up as a result of the tragedies
Therapy
that have been inflicted on people all over the world. Okay. Oh, what am I looking at here? Oh, here's an update on some of this, though. The light at the end of the tunnel, as I'm always trying to highlight. This is Government of Canada. This is Military Grievances External Review Committee. So this is the, just that. It's the Military Grievances External Review Committee. They're the ones who issued the report that said that General Ayer's vaccine mandate was a breach of Section 7 Charter rights, and then forwarded that assessment to him to decide what to do. And of course, he's not going to punish himself, but he is retiring this summer, so we'll see if the next guy does the right thing. But this is a little bit of news from the tip of the spear. The Canadian Armed Forces are leading the way in all of this, first with that grievance decision, and also with the help of Valor Legal Action Center and the mass tort that they have on the go for all the people who got 5F'd and were subjected to all of this criminal activity. But this is a case summary of a grievance that was filed, reference COVID-19, and it says, the griever contested that the Canadian Armed Forces, CAF, COVID-19 vaccine policy. He also disputed the denial of his request for religious accommodation, as well as the remedial measures he was issued for non-compliance with the CAF COVID-19 policy. There was no initial authority decision, as the matter being grieved concerned a decision, act, or omission by the Chief of Defence Staff. The committee found that the CAF COVID-19 vaccination policy infringed on rights protected under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Charter. The committee also found that although the policy was not in itself arbitrary in the context of the global COVID-19 pandemic, its implementation was overly broad and disproportionate. The committee concluded that the calf vaccination policy was contrary to the charter because it limited protected rights in a manner that was not proportional, failing to minimize the impairment of protected rights and strike a balance between those individual rights and the public interest. The committee also found that the griever had failed to establish the religious nexus required to gain approval of his accommodation request. Regarding the remedial measures issued to the griever, the committee found that they were not justified. Finally, the committee found that any negative comments associated low scores on the griever's annual performance assessments referring to the griever's refusal to be vaccinated would be unreasonable. The committee, that's their annual evaluation that they use for promotion. So they're digging them on their end of year scores for their refusal to take the jab. The committee recommended that the final authority afford partial redress by quashing the remedial measures, expunging all relevant documentation from the griever's personnel record, and directing the griever's annual performance assessment to be reviewed and, if necessary, revised to ensure that it contained no negative assessments relating to his refusal to be vaccinated. So the remedies are coming, guys. Drip, drip, drip. And the calf is at the tip of the spear, as we've been pointing out. And here's an update on Dr. Trozy. It says unrepentant CPSO revokes Dr. Trozy's license. CPSO revokes doctor's license in Ontario for maintaining scientific ethical integrity. And this is from Dr. Trozy's Substack directly. It's a pretty verbose article. Yeah, no, not too bad. All right, we'll give it a read. It says the recent news of the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario under the leadership of Registrar Dr. Nancy Whitmer revoking my license to practice in Ontario requires some response. There is a long line of the best doctors in Ontario, rare doctors who do not have COVID-19 blood on our hands, who are having our licenses unlawfully revoked by the medical licensing body that has gone rogue, is off mission, and in my opinion is guilty of crimes against humanity, assault, and murder in my province. The assault, I think, comes with a lack of informed consent when administering these injections. Without that, then it's assault. I am in my hometown, Bancroft, at the time of this writing. Here I am attending to the crisis of deaths, injuries, and turbo cancers resulting from the fraudulent, coerced, experimental, and contaminated COVID-19 genetic injections that the CPSO and others continue to misrepresent as, quote, safe and effective vaccines, close quote. This is modern war. I have consoled the mourning parents of children who were killed by these injections in my arms. Those are the worst of many casualties. I must find time to share more about the CPSO situation soon, but I cannot let it distract me from my mission to help the injured and stop these crimes and murders everywhere. Nancy Whitmore and other leaders at the CPSO are minor valiants in this story, nothing more. Guilty as hell and pathetic, but still minor characters whose tombstones will be small and forgotten. Here Canada's excellent constitutional lawyer, Michael Alexander, and I, joined by Glenn Young of Bright Light News on November 14th, to discuss the CPSO penalty hearing prior to this week's final declaration of non-repentance from Dr. Whitmore and her team at the CPSO. And he's got the video linked there. Dr. Trozy to appeal after college revokes his license. The Ontario Physicians and Surgeons Discipline Tribunal issued a penalty decision today revoking Dr. Mark Trozy's medical license after ruling in October that he had committed acts of professional misconduct by spreading misinformation about COVID-19 science and making statements critical of COVID-19 public health policies and recommendations. Through his counsel, Michael Alexander, Dr. Trozy, announced today that he will exercise his statutory right to appeal the decision to the Ontario Divisional Court. In reaching its decision, the tribunal rejected Supreme Court cases dating from 1939, which hold that Canadians enjoy an absolute constitutional right to express minority opinions on any subject. This allows the tribunal to rule that the college has a right to regulate the expression of its members in the name of public interest. The tribunal's ruling also rests on the prior discipline hearing decision, where the tribunal found that Dr. Trozy had caused harm by spreading misinformation, even though expert witnesses for the college failed to tender evidence that Dr. Trozy's statements had caused harm to a patient or a member of the public. In support of its ruling, the tribunal also rejected a 41-page report Dr. Trozy submitted in 2021, in which he defended himself against the college's initial allegation, citing 29 references from mainstream sources such as The Lancet, the New England Journal of Medicine, Public Health Ontario, and Statistics Canada. This was done without mentioning that the college's main expert witness, Dr. Andrew Gardam, had admitted in cross-examination during the discipline hearing that he had never attempted to refute the Troisi report. When the pandemic was on the horizon in 2020, Dr. Troisi, a university professor and a 25-year ER veteran, played a leading role in preparing his own ER facility to deal with the COVID patients. However, while the press was reporting in late 2020 that ER rooms were overwhelmed, Dr. Troisi's ER room was virtually empty. Wondering how this could be, Dr. Troisi called colleagues around Canada and the US to inquire about their experiences and learned that their ER rooms were empty too. Well, we could see that from the TikTok videos, right? As a result, Dr. Troisi began to study COVID-19 science rigorously and soon discovered the government's narrative regarding the virus was deeply flawed. He then quit his job and devoted himself full-time to exploring the truth about all things COVID on a dedicated site. And that's drtroisi.org. When a scientist friendly to the government's narrative alerted the College of Physicians to the site that Dr. Troisi's heretical views, the college launched an investigation that resulted in his prosecution for professional misconduct. Alexander commented, quote, "Since Dr. Troisi's right to appeal to the divisional court is based on a statute, the court will be required to employ the highest standard of review on all legal issues, and that standard is correctness." In other words, the court will have to determine whether the tribunal got the right answer on every key legal issue, and where it does not, the court will be required to correct the tribunal's reasoning. The college has never had to face a fundamental challenge to its authority on this basis, close quote, on the basis of correctness. I'll just reiterate what I have been saying is the key battle space is in the courts now. I think that's our best shot, even though we are going to get mixed reviews in the aggregate over time. Things will turn in the right direction. He added, quote, "On correctness review, it will be very hard for the college to justify its initial decision to investigate Dr. Troisi. Under the legislation, the college must have reasonable and probable grounds, which is the criminal standard for believing that a member has committed an offense before it can launch an investigation. However, in its orders, the college did not describe any evidence to support the probable belief that Dr. Troisi had done something wrong and even failed to cite a specific offense. The appeal should succeed on this point alone," close quote. Finally, quote, the Court of Appeal's recent decision to refuse to hear Jordan Peterson's case does not mean, as some have speculated, that freedom of expression is dead in Ontario. The Peterson case turned on the issue of whether the College of Psychologists could regulate the form of Dr. Peterson's expression, not its content. In Troisi, the divisional court must decide whether to recognize the right of every citizen to express an alternative opinion, even if it offends censorious bureaucrats, close quote. And then you got, for immediate inquiries, please contact Michael Alexandra. There's his number and all that proton mail stuff there. If you guys want to check that out, it's on Troisi's Substack. But all kinds of brave people still taking it to the machine. And, we've got a few big wins in the last week here. David Lametti resigning and the federal courts declaring the EMA invocation ultra vires. So, I think that the tide is turning, guys, and plenty of good people still keeping at it in this fight. Here's Concerned Canadian. He says, "So well said. Love this exchange. Axe the tax." So here's another piece of the progressive dogma. It's the global boiling, the idea of global boiling, and that CO2 is a pollutant. And CO2, practically speaking, on a geologic timescale, has never been so low in the atmosphere as it is right now. And ice ages are a thing. They terrify me a hell of a lot more than any prospect of global boiling does. If you don't know anything about ice ages, you should go and read up on it. They're absolutely murderous. When life exploded on the planet, there was more CO2, more carbon in the atmosphere, way more than there ever was now. So, here is an exchange. They're saying that, taxes change the weather. And here is an exchange on this particular progressive trope.
Never before have we seen ignorance used as a political strategy the way this Liberal government uses it. It's shameful. At the end of the day, Canadians are struggling day in and day out to be able to heat their homes, to be able to put food on their tables, and to be able to care for their families. And the carbon tax only increases that cost more. And what do you know? On April 1st, the carbon tax is scheduled to go up yet again. This government is going to hike it again on April 1st. So what does government choose to put its feet into reality and to acknowledge the struggle that everyday Canadians face and show a little bit of compassion, scrap the tax, stop the increase?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
You know, Mr. Speaker, earlier today the Conservatives were talking about hypocrisy, and that is a subject they know a lot about. The poverty rate in Canada has been cut in half. And you know what they want to do next? They want to take carbon price rebate checks out of the bank accounts of Canadian families. That's $1,000 in Ontario, more than $1,000 in Alberta, Saskatchewan. That will hurt Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Lethbridge.
There's this government's false perception of reality, and then there's the reality that everyday Canadians are experiencing. I would invite the honourable member to consider what the reality actually is. If she could only come down from her high horse and enter into the everyday life of Canadians, she might understand. Not everyone lives in downtown Toronto and has access to the luxuries that she does. Canadians are struggling. They are struggling to put food on their tables. They are struggling to pay their heating bills. They are struggling to be able to care for their families. Record numbers of Canadians are using food banks, and it has a lot to do with the carbon tax, which is scheduled to increase on April 1st. Will this government axe the tax?
All right, so there are the Conservatives taking a more aggressive approach, at least on, I think a smaller point. This one is a winning point, though, because Canadians are not on board with this carbon tax nonsense. So, not bad. All righty, and here is Steve Malloy. CO2 continued to green the earth between 2001 and 2020, reports new study. So CO2 is great for plants and all life on earth. Additional comment, the study reports greening despite drought, but there is no actual trend in drought. And he gives all the links here. Let's get a look at some of these graphics he's putting out. Global greening continues despite increased drought stress since 2000. And I'm not sure what all these different terms are, but looks like we're showing a general trend in the upward direction, everything kind of getting greener. And here's some highlights here. The global greening is an indisputable fact. The rate of global greening increases slightly. The drought has only slowed the global greening, but not caused the global browning. And some highlighted passages here says, our results showed that the global greening was still present in 2001 to 2020, with 55.15% of areas greening at an accelerated rate, mainly concentrated in India and the European plains, compared with 7.28% of browning. So 51.15% of areas are greening, and only 7.28% are browning. Doesn't sound like global boiling to me, guys. CO2 dominated the LIA trend, while climate change determined the LIA growth rate. And then we have, at the global scale, vegetation continued greening during the 2001 to 2020 period. We further calculated the dominant drivers of LIA trend in each grid. We found that CO2 dominated the LIA trend of 75.63% of the globe. Oh my God! So CO2 dominated the greening effect here in 75% of cases, 76% of cases, and also let's see, 64.06% of the area showed accelerated greening. So not only is it greening, but it's greening at a faster rate than before. The areas that browning was accelerated was only 2.07%. So 64.06% accelerated greening and only 2.07% accelerated browning. So things are getting better. It's better for the planet to have more CO2 in the atmosphere. Final thing here, it says, drought trend could not lead to global browning, as it could not overtake the positive effect of CO2 fertilization that contributed to the global vegetation. So there you go, folks. Everything is getting better with more CO2 in the atmosphere. All right. Okay, here is Patrick Brown. He is where is he? Mayor of Brampton, I think. Yeah, he's the mayor of Brampton now. He was the Conservative Party leader. He was premier there at one point, and he is the guy who eventually had to step aside. Like, there were these by-elections where they were selecting new candidates. I think it was just like new. Anyway, they were selecting a bunch of new candidates in all these different ridings around Ontario, and the constituency offices, like they selected their candidates, everybody who were members, they voted and they selected the candidates for each one of those constituencies. And then he came back in multiple ridings and he was like, no, that's not the guy I want that guy. So that guy's the guy. Total flagrant disregard for the democratic process. And Son of a Bench is tweeting, Brampton, Ontario now has an electric fire truck. What happens during an extended long call? Or if there are power outages? Great question. It is an emergency vehicle, after all, that is expected to perform in an emergency such as a prolonged power outage. There are so many situations where this could result in loss of life. Yeah, you don't say. But here is Patrick Brown and his toy fire truck.
Our electric fire truck has arrived. Brampton continues to be a leader on the environment and being a green city. We are one of the leading cities in the world when it comes to the electrification of our municipal vehicles. We're the first city in Ontario, the second in Canada, and this is part of our history in Brampton for being environmental leaders. It was our late Premier, Bill Davis, a Brampton resident, who actually created the Ministry of the Environment in Ontario when he was Premier. It didn't exist before. So as Bramptonians, we know this is part of who we are, a city that cares about being green and being great examples for the next generation on the environment.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, there he is, saving us all from global boiling. Now, here is Andy Lee. So where's this all going back to? It's this is the case that I've been making. The Chinese Communist Party basically owns us, and the global boiling stuff is more like a psyop to weaken the West economically to the point that we won't be able to. Well, everything's being weakened. Our militaries are decimated. There's the social cohesion is at an all-time low. We don't really believe in ourselves anymore, and you know, the global boiling stuff is the psyop to decimate us economically so that we won't even be able to mount any kind of response when they go after Taiwan, and probably continue to pursue their agenda of global dominance, especially through the Belt and Road Initiative. And before I go on here, I just wanted to chime in on a couple of the chats. Because let me see now. Lake 10 over on Rumble. Hey folks, for me. Yeah, that's right. You owe me some push-ups. So drop and give me 10. And somebody, I just busted you over here on the other one. And it was Colleen. I think Colleen jumped in here. Yep. She says, good afternoon from Ontario. So Colleen, you're late. I appreciate you being with us every day, but you're late. So drop and give me 10. Okay. So yeah, the PSYOP, this commie PSYOP coming from China to weaken the West in every possible way, right down to sterilizing our children. They're playing the long game, and they have control of the Liberal Party of Canada. So they're pushing the Chinese agenda across the board. And here is Andy Lee. She says, WeChat post shared ahead of the 2021 election warned that Conservative Kenny Chiu has introduced a foreign registry legislation that will be used to, quote, suppress the Chinese community. And they use racism. That's their whole trope, right? I think they think it's kind of hilarious that we even give a damn about racism, as in the West thinks it's a bad thing. Like, they're unabashedly racist over there in China. I mean, I've shown that laundry detergent commercial from China where the Chinese woman puts a black eye in the washing machine and he comes out Chinese. That's how unabashedly racist they are over there. And they just hurl all these different names and shaming tactics on us because it's Maoist, right? It's a Maoist strategy. So it's shame for the outsider, praise for the insider, and loyalty is rewarded over competence. And she's retweeting the Nia Vanderstill, and she says, Canada's Foreign Affairs knew that election interference was being coordinated in WeChat, but since no one would answer the phone and that the interference helped the Liberals, they didn't do anything about it. And she is tweeting at the graphic here, the Black Locks reporter. Disinformation China says China shows growing sophistication in carrying out online information campaigns to influence audiences in Canada and around the globe. Beijing can move quickly to saturate social media platforms with its preferred messaging, but is also nimble enough to micro-target its messages through Anglophone, Francophone, and Chinese-speaking audience throughout Canada. And down here, the part that's underlined, it says, WeChat maker Tencent does not provide disclosures to the public on when it discovers or suspects an incident of foreign interference. That seems like a problem that should probably be shored up. That's a vulnerability, right? And Chinese wouldn't take our calls. The Department of Foreign Affairs says it suspected Chinese agents used WeChat to meddle in the 2021 federal campaign, but didn't act since the media platform wouldn't take questions. WeChat is owned by Shenzhen conglomerate. Quote, it was not interpreted to be our job. Okay. And here's Rebel News, and they're saying feds knew of Chinese meddling in WeChat but never acted. Global Affairs Canada refrained from taking action on foreign interference allegations against China after WeChat, a Chinese social media platform, did not respond to officials. And you get the full story over at veteran-hating-rebelnews.com. Feds knew of Chinese meddling, and it says a June 12th federal memo contends that Chinese agents targeted diaspora populations in Canada through WeChat. It uncovered, quote, unusual account activity, close quote, to influence votes in ridings. Global Affairs Canada refrained from taking action on foreign interference allegations against China after WeChat, a Chinese social media platform, did not respond to officials. Quote, China shows growing sophistication in carrying out online information campaigns to influence audiences in Canada, close quote. According to a June 12 department memo to a deputy minister, it contends that Chinese agents targeted diaspora populations through China-based platforms like WeChat. Quote, there are many people in Canada who are on an ongoing basis being targeted by foreign interference, and it was not my job to inform them, close quote, testified Rob Stewart, the recipient of the memo and a former deputy minister of public safety. He's a deputy minister of public safety, and it's not my job to inform him, is his answer. That is kind of like the other side of just doing my job, right? Like strictly only doing my job. Yeah, it wasn't my job to do it. Well, it was the right thing to do, so nothing stopped you from doing that. He previously served as a federal monitor for alleged election interference in 2021. Quote, there are processes and ways of doing so, close quote, said the deputy minister. Quote, in this instance, I was not tracking what other people were doing, close quote. Quote, we were informed of questionable activity in various ridings, close quote, clarified Stewart. And it says, the memo uncovered, quote, unusual account activity on WeChat that constitutes disinformation and attempts by various parties to influence votes in ridings, close quote. However, it took no action since WeChat is owned by Tencent Holdings Limited, a media corporation headquartered in Shenzhen. Tencent does not publicly disclose suspected incidents of foreign interference, reported Blacklock's reporter. The deputy minister testified that the Canadian Security Intelligence Services, CSIS, twice informed him that Chinese agents used WeChat to target Conservative MP Michael Chong. Global People magazine, a publication by China's official news outlet, the People's Daily Press, shared disinformation against Chong, reported Rebel News. The campaign targeted the outspoken China critic originated from the outlet's WeChat channels, but the federal government never informed Chong in advance. While Global Affairs Canada said it is highly probable China orchestrated the operation, given the coordinated timing and content of the social media posts, CSIS memos obtained by the Bureau confirmed China, quote unquote, weaponized the application during the 2021 election. Yeah, it's a weapon of disinformation, right? It's a propaganda tool. Former Conservative MP Kenny Chiu, also victim of coordinated disinformation campaign by Beijing, introduced Bill C-282 in 2021 to establish the Foreign Influence Registry. However, he lost his re-election that year, claiming to be a target of election interference himself. There is some weight to those claims, as first reported by Rebel. WeChat posts show a coordinated campaign calling on all Chinese Canadians to oppose and vote against Conservative MP Kenny Chiu due to the introduction of Bill C-282, claiming the bill was, quote, catch all for our pro-China associations, close quote. And they're probably going to call him a racist too, right? That was what Vincent Ke said to Globalist News when they asked him about, him coordinating with the Chinese to hold on to the two Michaels a little bit longer until the Liberals win the next election. And he was like, you can't, I sent an email. You can't ask that question. It's very racist. That is part of the tactic. No such registration exists in Canada, permitting the outlets to operate freely without disclosing their activities. Stewart testified that he received numerous security memos, quote, bundled into a binder. Every couple of days you get a binder, close quote, he said. You flip through the, quote, you flip through the binder and you try to detect trends or issues of interest, close quote. Quote, how thick is that binder, close quote, asked Liberal MP Mark Garrettson. Quote, a couple of inches, close quote, replied Stewart. Disclosure of WeChat memo coincides with the commencement of the public inquiry into foreign interference. Well, none of the parties in opposition have standing at that public inquiry into Chinese interference. So it's probably just going to be another dog and pony show. Certainly, I hope not, but that seems to be what they're trying to pull. And here is Chris Erickson. He says, remember when a former CSIS intelligence officer testified that all Canadian governments since Brian Mulroney have been compromised by China? I remember. Yeah, and back in the 90s, the Americans conducted Operation Dragon Lord, where they found that we were absolutely lousy with communists, and the Chinese Communist Party was making all kinds of headway here in Canada. And then there was that other report by the Canadian government, which was the Sidewinder report. It was a joint effort between the RCMP and CSIS. And then the RCMP came out screaming about how they sanitized the final report, and it wasn't nearly as damning as what the RCMP had collaborated on drafting initially. And then I think the full report was eventually leaked to the Globe and Mail. So you have the Americans giving us a robust report, and then we're like, yeah, we can do that too. And then, oh, wait a second, we can't. Why not? Well, maybe it's because they've been interfering for that long, right? So here is this guy.
Chinese operators. It is also caused by our own candidates, elected official, political staff that are either naive or calculate intentionally to gain power with the assistance of the Chinese government. The Chinese intelligence service are so good at it because they understand the electoral system, the weakness of the human being, and their work is on long-term gain. So today, I want to be very clear, and I want to be very clear. We can prove that every federal government, from Mr. Mulroney to Mr. Trudeau, have been compromised by agents of the Communist China. Every government were informed at one point or another. Every government choose to ignore CSIS warning either by negligence, self-interest, or partisanship. Every government were infiltrated by agents of influence acting on behalf of the Chinese government, and we knew who they were. Every government took decisions that are questionable about China and can only be explained by interference exercised from within or motivated by self-interest. Not only the sitting government have been compromised, but all federal political parties have been compromised at one point or another. The inaction of the federal government, all federal governments, were led to attacks on many municipal and provincial governments. Ultimately, every government have been part of the problem, not the solution. And remember, not only China is practicing interference. Considering these facts, I respectfully would like to propose some actions to be taken. 1, establish a mandatory process for all future elected officials, political staff, and volunteers to swear and to sign a declaration that they are not under the influence or acting on behalf of a foreign government or entity. This form will clearly warn of possible criminal procedures in case of intentional deception. 2, eliminate the possibility for foreigners to vote for the selection of candidates and nominees. This is an obvious nonsense. 3, give an explicit and clear security briefing to all newly elected MP and have them sign that they attended and understood the briefing, with again warning of repercussion in case of deception. Prevention is our best defense.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is nobody ever did anything with any of this stuff since it was first uncovered back in the 90s. And I think that goes to show you just how deeply entangled we are within the 10,000 talons of that commie dragon at present. So it's going to take a long and sustained effort, I think, to extirpate ourselves from that. Okay, so they all knew, they were all in on it. They all sold us out, going all the way back to the 90s. Where is all this headed? Wall Street Silver says pay with your palm is now available at 1,000 plus grocery stores across the USA, turning into China one step at a time. And the low information people are walking into it willingly with a smile. Yeah, that's because the elites haven't told them to do any different. And well, they just kind of go with whatever the fancy people are saying. So look at this fancy stuff. Here we go. Pay with your palm. Creepy police state stuff. This is getting right down to the 15-minute cities and the CBDCs and all this stuff. Now, the good news is they're going bankrupt. So here's CNBC. Evergrande shares halted after Hong Kong court orders liquidation. Ha, ha, ha. So Evergrande is a massive real estate conglomerate over there in China. And yeah, apparently an actual legit judge in Hong Kong say, no fraud around. So they have been ordered to liquidate. So shares of China's Evergrande were briefly halted after plunging more than 20% in early trading. The Hong Kong court decision comes after it was reported that Evergrande's overseas creditors failed to reach an 11th hour deal this weekend to restructure. Shares of China's Evergrande were halted after plummeting more than 20% in early trading Monday after a Hong Kong court ruled to liquidate the embattled property developer. It comes against the backdrop of a spiraling debt crisis in the country. China Evergrande, which was once one of the country's largest property developers, has in the last few years been enveloped by Beijing's debt crisis. The Wall Street Journal earlier reported that Evergrande's overseas creditors failed to reach an 11th hour deal this weekend to restructure, which could mean imminent liquidation for the real estate developer. Check this out. This is obviously a very troubling graph here. So it looks like the value is absolutely tanking, like back here in 2019. Wow. And not even that long ago, 2019. We're at 27.95, and now we're down to 0.163. Looks good on you. So Evergrande is the world's most indebted property developer, which defaulted in 2021 and announced an offshore debt restructuring program in March last year, containing the contagion. Policymakers in China have been scrambling to stem the debt crisis in the beleaguered property sector. Last week, China's central bank and the Ministry of Finance announced measures to help boost the liquidity available to property developers. The actions, which will be valid until the end of this year, will help ease a lingering cash crunch for Chinese developers after Beijing cracked down on the sector to address bloated debt levels in real estate. The property sector in China still remains challenging against the backdrop of Evergrande news, according to Alexander Kusli, APAC investment strategist at Russell Investments. Quote, I think the measures have to be much more targeted and much more forceful, close quote. Kusli said in CNBC's, quote, Streets Signs Asia, close quote. Evergrande's crisis set off a contagion of fears that China's property sector troubles could spill over to other parts of the world's second largest economy. Country Garden, also one of China's largest developers, has been struggling to pay off its own debt. However, the developer reportedly said last month that it may avoid default and that its yuan-denominated bonds. Okay, so yuan-denominated. This is a massive Chinese company. This thing is actually like really huge. Like I think they make up a third of the economy over there, or something like that. So if this this thing could have the potential to drag them down. Now, there are a couple of things that could happen here. I'll get into that in a second, though. Let's see. Keanu says, a Hong Kong court has ordered the liquidation of China's largest real estate developer, Evergrande, with more than $300 billion in liabilities, more than the debt of an entire country like South Africa. This will no doubt have a ripple effect on the world economy. China's real estate sector also accounts for almost 1/3 of GDP and a significant contraction should be expected. Classic communism. And he's got the little skull there. Death. Classic communism. Yeah, that's what you can expect. Wow. Yeah, look at that. It just tanks. And it's the same numbers I was showing here before, right? All the way down to 0.163. And I think that's in yuan. Yeah, if their real estate sector accounts for 1/3 of their GDP, because they've been building like crazy over there, they even have these ghost cities that aren't even populated, which I believe are fallback positions in case one of their real cities gets nuked. So they've been doing all of this, and it's all a house of cards, and it looks like it's coming tumbling down. People have been talking about China being on a fiscal cliff for probably a decade now. So it looks like those chickens might come home to roost. That also kind of puts them even more on a war footing. Like, what are they supposed to do? It's they might have to invade Taiwan to try to pillage and plunder it, but I don't know. Maybe they really are a paper tiger. Are they going to be able to pull it off? Well, there seems to be an awful lot of dissent within the regime right now. An awful lot of people are pushing back, and Xi Jinping has disappeared a lot of the senior communist officials, as well as replaced all the generalships. So there seems to be quite a rebellion that's taking shape over there as well. So all of this is happening at once, and this is probably our best hope, guys, is that they just kind of implode on their own. And here is Colin Rugg. Speaking of signs of hope, here is Colin Rugg. He says, just in, Snoop Dogg says that he now has, quote, nothing but love and respect, close quote, for Donald Trump. Wow. The comments came during an interview with the Times. Quote, Donald Trump, he ain't done nothing wrong to me. He has done only great things for me, close quote. Snoop specifically pointed out how Trump pardoned the co-founder of his first label, Michael Harris. Quote, so I have nothing in love and respect for Donald Trump, close quote, he said. The statement is a complete 180 after Snoop Dogg made a music video in 2017 appearing to shoot Donald Trump. Yeah, that is a complete 180. And culture matters. And this guy is a pop culture icon, obviously. I remember him from the 90s. Like, he was he was wildly popular, still is today. He went from faux shooting Donald Trump in the head. Now, I think it wasn't that he actually shot him. It was more like a pistol with a flag that shot out of it that said bang or something. But still, the implication, I think, is essentially that he thinks somebody should assassinate the president, or that he would like to. But here he is doing a complete 180 on that. And politics is downstream from culture. So this is a really strong development, I think, in the cultural battle. So little trouble with the Facebook Reels stuff here. It's a little harder to manage, but this is what's going on in Texas. So if you guys are following the Texas border crisis down there, I mean, it's been ongoing forever, but there's a standoff now between Governor Greg Abbott and the Biden administration, where Biden is sending some the Border Patrol agents down there, and they're talking about like removing the barricades and the Constantine wire or razor wire, I guess, that the Texas National Guard has put up there. I saw I think I showed it the other day, where the Texas the Border Patrol's union is saying it's not going to be a standoff. Like, we support the rank and file. We're following the orders to go down there, but really, like, this is not as is not quite the standoff that everybody thinks it is. And that was coming right from their union. So. But now, apparently, there are multiple states, I think about 20 states that, I think there are 26 states who the governors, they issued these strong statements supporting Abbott. But now there's a convoy headed for Texas to support Abbott and to protect the border. Here it is. Okay. And Anita was just asking, why did it take Abbott 2 frickin' years to make a move? Yeah, great question, but that is the like consistent, widespread, unanimous question that we're always asking of the U.S. Republicans. It's like, what do you guys even do? What is the point of having another party when you just kind of, tepidly feign going after them and opposing them, and really they don't have anything to brag about. That's for sure. They just get run because the Democrats just run roughshod over the Republicans constantly. So at least he's doing something now. I can't help but think that it probably has something to do with the fact that it's an election year as well. So it's going to be very harmful to Biden. Maybe, there were some other means like legally and stuff that he had to exhaust before it got to this point. But at least it's happening now, right? So, all right. Yeah. Okay. We're coming up on the end here, folks. This was a little something I wanted to plug for the guys out at V4F Atlantic. Well, not out here in V4F Atlantic where I am. And it says V4F, first annual Salty Shaker, barbecue, camping, fun, presentations, fundraising. And you're invited, V4F, it says invited, V4F Atlantic members, family, special guests, when 24 August 2024, we're outside Truro to be announced. And members, please email to our SVP atlantic@veteransforfreedom.ca. So yeah, if you're a member of Veterans for Freedom, please RSVP to atlantic@veteransforfreedom.ca. It's going to be family friendly, so you can bring the wife and kids and all that stuff, and should be a great time. So something to look forward to for the summer there, guys. And I got to say, Brian is doing a fantastic job pulling this thing together. Very organized, and communication's been great. And planning this far out as well is the way to do it. You have to plan an event this size this far out. So absolutely fantastic job on the part of V4F Atlantic leadership. Okay, and here is the Veterans for Freedom website, and you can go to Veterans for Freedom and support us by clicking support, but we also have the support fund available for anybody who wants to donate. The purpose of the support fund is to help Canadians who are suffering under this tyranny, and everybody who donates gets a chance to vote on where the pool of donations goes every month. So you can sign up for a subscription here at the website. And it says our contestants this month are Helen Gruss, and she is the Ottawa police detective who is being persecuted right now in Ottawa for trying to protect babies during the early vaccine rollout. Kimberly Newdorf was fined $37,000 for organizing peaceful demonstrations during the pandemic. And Lisa Robinson is a Pickering City Council member and a single mother who's been sanctioned 90 days wages for standing up for her constituents. So, she could definitely use the help as well. You'll also get the option to send 10% of your donation to Operation Feed, which is a Feed St. John's, a locally based nonprofit organization fighting to win the war on hunger, and while providing support to our local veterans and emergency workers. So all kinds of great causes there, guys. You can just click on one of these buttons here to sign up with your credit card, or if you want to send an e-transfer, you can send it to fund@veteransforfreedom.ca, preferably with your auto deposit enabled. But if you're not able to do that, please use the password Fund for Freedom. That's all caps Fund, number 4, all caps Freedom, and we'll make sure that gets off to one of our worthy causes. That brings us all the way back around to Friedrich Nietzsche, and he says, "I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on, I can't believe you." Yeah, and I think that relates particularly to that mother who signed up all of her children for the vaccine trials. You want to talk about a Nietzschean statist cult? Like, that's it right there. That's what he said in God is Dead, right? He said that, God is dead, and now we have killed him, and woe to us for... We'll put the religious impulse into something else, namely the state. And I think that's what humans really worship, is they worship power. But yeah, once they put that faith into the state, well, he basically forecasted communism, right? And this is just our turn to struggle with this. The more we secularize as a society here, the more we can see people being indoctrinated into that statist cult. And I think that, the people of faith are overrepresented in the freedom community for that reason. It serves as some kind of inoculation against this kind of indoctrination. So, no better example, I think, no more salient than that woman who whose poor daughter has quite a long road ahead of her now. But at least her faith can be shaken, and it's going to take a few more people, feeling a little more pain, I think, before their faith is finally shaken and broken. But we're going to win in the end. I think we're going to win. We're getting momentum in the whole shebang, so it's great to see. Oh, speaking of the momentum, I almost pooped the bed, but tomorrow is appearance. Well, I don't know if he's going to be on the witness list there for tomorrow, but Morgan May has her court case there tomorrow at 9:30 in Dartmouth. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as well. Could be really interesting if we get some of our public officials cross-examined by her or any of the other parties' lawyers. So we'll keep an eye on that for you guys and let you know what is happening. So I'll say goodbye before I sign off here, guys. Let's see. Evelyn is here saying, take care all. And Sharon is saying, Abbott is a WEF that answers to some questions. Oh, Greg Abbott. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But something to watch. It seems like they're kind of really kicking up a stink over this one. And maybe it's all smoke and mirrors, but only time will tell. Let's see. Holly says, thanks, Jeff. Great show. Wishing all a great day. Yeah. Thanks for staying with me, guys. Until next time, stay frosty and stay safe.
Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs.